that you hang on for this. We're going to talk about some of the cool new stuff in 2021.2, but also some of the new stuff in just 2021.1. The things that we think are interesting and useful for everyday developers, and some of the more advanced and interesting topics as well. If you have something, one of these Unity versions that you're curious about, by the way, please drop a question or a comment. Just let us know what it is you're curious about, or if it's just something you're excited about, a system you think we should talk about, please just let us know and share. And outside of that, I just want to say thanks again for joining us. Welcome. Please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and share. It helps a lot. And let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So, I guess before we dive into what's in the new versions of Unity, are you guys using the latest version of Unity with anything, or have you guys played with it much on your own projects? How are you guys with that? Like, do you use the LTS version, or do you switch up to the latest Unity versions right away?
I guess I'll go ahead.
I keep with the LTS versions, so I don't switch up straight away, simply because I've been burnt too many times before.
It's interesting. I know a lot of people like that, and I had questions about that in the Q&A call earlier today for the architecture course. So I was kind of curious where you're all at. What about you, Yori? Do you use the latest version? You like bleeding edge or experimenting, or where are you at there?
Every single project that I'm working on my own, I always go to the bleeding edge and trying out the new editor as soon as it comes out. Sometimes I do get burned and I have to downgrade the project, but I do find a lot of the features very fun to use, and I find that if I don't use them on the version they come out, I'll never hear about them again, and I lose the opportunity to learn how to use them to their full effect. So this is my motivation for going and seeing everything new. But when working with a team, I always use an LTS version because I don't want anyone to get burned, and to make sure no one needs to update their Unity version 50 times over when we're working together. So using 2020.3 has been a pretty easy way to get everybody on board and doing what they need to do.
For my stuff, I've always used the oldest LTS that the Asset Store allows, which is right now 2019.4 LTS, simply because most things are forward compatible. So anything on the Asset Store should be delivered in the oldest version it can be. But that means I do miss out on essentially almost 2 years worth of cool stuff. So I did just update my Legend of the Stones projects super early in development, so it doesn't really matter if I get burned. But to 2021.2, mostly because there's a new asset called Fluffy that just came out that requires this, and I know I'm going to be using it in the game. So I figure, hey, might as well make that jump now since I'm going to use it regardless. But other than that, I'm always 2 years behind everybody, which kind of frustrates me.
I usually just keep one project that's the playtest new features project, and then everything else I keep on older LTSs. Mostly because every so often they pull the rug out from under you. For example, since it's been integrated, Pro Builder has been completely redesigned. Like all of the shortcuts are still, not all the shortcuts, but like the UI is different, and the way to, for example, the default button that did the default cube now does a different behavior. It's a good behavior. It's fine. They had new features, but the way it always worked and has worked for years since I've been using it isn't the same anymore. And so if I don't keep up on these things, they catch me off guard and I lose a lot of productivity. So I keep them just to keep up to date mostly. But yeah, not in a real project.
I think that's generally good advice. Do it on the experimental stuff, just not on the things that are about to release, because you never know what's going to go wrong. And I've talked before about upgrading and having things just randomly break. So you got to watch out. I'm curious, Andrew, on this Fluffy asset that you were mentioning. You said it requires the latest version of Unity. What is this asset? Why is it so cool? And is it part of the sale that you're going to talk about later?
It's not. It's called Fluffy Grooming Tool. Let me find on the Asset Store. And it basically is hair and short hair and fur for Unity, and it works in HERP, URP, built-in render pipeline. And there's the link, and it's quite impressive. I've been talking to Daniel Zellers, the publisher of this asset, the producer of this asset, and he's been working on it for months and months, but waiting for this version to come out. I'm not sure exactly what the technique is that is required, but I think it has something to do with the way in one of these scenes here, there's like a balloon or a ball that goes over the fur and it displaces the fur down. And I think it's that is what he was waiting for, something like that. But either way, it's very impressive hair and fur. Works with third-party stuff, so of course, there you go with the hair being moved, and that one as well. So there's a lot of third-party assets. So he's been kind enough to use my Minotaur pack. There's some stuff from Albert's Animations, and he's got this new demo with human, sure, facial hair. Basically, it's the best fur I've ever seen in Unity. It's the thing that for me, I've never produced too many furry characters because I never liked the way fur looked, and it just kind of annoyed me. So now I feel like I can produce furry characters. In fact, the horse that we came out with this past summer was specifically because I knew this package was coming out. And hopefully I'll be doing a live stream at some point with Daniel, and we're going to live stream making a furry horse with this tool. So
this is very
it's just really impressive. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I have to try this thing out. This looks really neat. Everybody that's not watching and just listening, you're missing out on some really crazy looking cool fur and hair. It's see like some really realistic hair that just kind of acts.
He does specify short hair. As far as I can tell, really well. I've played with it a little bit in the beta version of this version, just to groom a character. It's pretty easy to actually add the hair. And then once it's there, it just kind of works, and it seems to be quite performant.
Nice.
I'm just thinking about how stacking this up with cloths that benefit like a fur coat or something. How much of a waste would it be to not have a feature of like first person just interacting with these? Because you see all that, but then the character can't do anything with it. Usually in games.
Make it in affect gameplay. You got to pet the horses right, so that way they're happy and they run faster, Andrew. A part of the game, you got to groom them properly.
I mean, isn't there like a pet the dog simulator that's really popular right now or something? So I would imagine that this could be used for all sorts of pet the creature simulators. Don't get bit.
Reminds me of those old games that you managed pets and there were all sorts of mechanics that you had to tend to them, like a Tamagotchi, but there's been a gap between the last time I've seen a game like that. So this might be the tool to make this happen again.
Yeah, put it on a mobile device, make it, I don't know, your background so your animal's always there and on your screen. I don't know if you can do that.
Then you can stroke your pet on your mobile device with a gesture.
Yeah. Yep. All the kids will be in school.
Stroking their pets.
All right. Well, it seems like my internet connection's a little bit spotty, guys. So if I drop out, bear with me, I guess. But are you guys ready to jump on to the new Unity features and new Unity 2021 and 2021 2021.1 and 0.2 stuff, I guess? Start talking about those a bit.
Yeah, but before we do that, somebody mentioned that we mentioned being burned by new Unity versions, and what does this actually mean? Can we cover it? So does anyone want to begin on the dangers of using the latest Unity?
I've got one story. The project broke on me. I remember I was working on a client project, and I built stuff into a DLL, and I was writing code. It was an Android project, and it read some assets from the device. And not thinking about it, I used a simple resources.load, the inbuilt Unity feature to load resources. And I built the DLL and packaged it and sent it, whatever, and it was in the project. And then I was gone for a couple of days, and this is for a game jam. And they upgraded the project, and resources.load stopped working. Like just that function threw exceptions when it didn't before. And I wasn't there to change it. And as I'm the only coder, and I was the only person who knew how to build a DLL and send the thing, they were screwed basically. So there was they had to wait a day or two where the project wouldn't work because my code had an assumption that Unity would work in my code, that was in a DLL that I had as part of the project. So yeah, that was a major problem that was caused exclusively because we updated, and a Unity version just broke one of the features.
From an asset publisher, 5.4, Unity 5.4 way back in the day broke one of my key features. Back then, you could customize textures inside the editor and then click a button to export all the new textures that you created. That button broke in 5.4. It never got fixed in 5.4. So all my stuff, for anyone using 5.4, suddenly a key feature broke. Everything else worked fine, but that one thing. And so, I mean, that was when I first realized, okay, I should kind of like stick to the LTS versions. I don't think LTS existed at that time, though. So everyone would update to 5.4. Everyone had these issues. I would get negative reviews. I would tell people update to 5.5 when it comes out. But now you'll find a lot of publishers on the SS Store are doing LTS only for that reason, because they get burned. They don't want other people to get burned. And I think a lot more people who use assets, if you use assets your project, will find it more valuable to stick to LTS for that reason. So it's like a community burn.
Yeah, I've got plenty of stories. I assume you do too, Dave?
Yeah, and it's all around Unity 5 when they were putting things on and chucking them off and doing all those sort of things. So if you were always catching up to the latest version, you were always going through the changelog to see which bits were broken, what were the known issues, because there were always things that were in and out. And since then, to be honest, since 2018, I've not had any major issues, but then I stopped going to the bleeding edge. As with the other guy said, I open up a little playground project and have a little go on things with the latest versions, but I don't ever use them in production.
Yeah, in my experience, it's been basically very similar, I guess, since the Unity 5 days where things were relatively risky, and that's when I had most of my big issues. It hasn't been too bad. It's only when you get into like assets or packages that they add in, like, you know, completely deprecating the networking stack, or there have been a couple other little things that they've done, but overall, it hasn't been an issue. I'd say that they've gotten much better at stabilizing things. I mean, things that are marked experimental now are the stuff that I expect is going to break, like dots. You know, anything that's marked experimental or not marked as done, I would expect to have that possibility. But the core part of the engine and most of like just the way that the game engine works in general, I don't expect that to have breaking changes from version to version anymore. At least I haven't seen that as a pattern for the last few years.
I would say maybe not breaking changes entirely, but one thing that does happen and has caught me off guard a few times is, so a lot of the editor stuff now, they're moving towards threading that they hadn't done before. There's a lot of tasks in the background that are trying to be done more efficiently or faster, like just the various different builds and pop-ups and dialogues and loading assets and whatever. And some of them have issues. And so we've probably all seen this memalloc issues in Unity, where every so often it tries to do something and very clearly there's threads gone awry in the background. And so just having the editor open tanks your performance. So some versions of Unity will actively, just using Unity will cause issues. And so you have to keep closing it and opening it. Now, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't really stop you working too much, but it does mean that over time you're getting weird scenarios where windows will flicker or disappear, or certain content will stop showing up, or you'll get errors in the console. And it can just mean that certain upgraded versions, if it's one of the ones that isn't an LTS, can just be slower to develop on. And even that is not worth the cost for me. I don't like having to rely on what random windows are going to not work the way they kind of used to last time, even if it's only temporary.
Yeah. There's also all the issues regarding packages updating for you when you upgrade a version of a project. So I had multiple cases of verified packages breaking or changing behavior as I was upgrading my project. Specifically, I had an issue where addressables straight up removed a method that I was using to access the assets. And I had to go and look up the changes and why they changed, etc., etc. There was a version of the new input system that, for a specific Unity version, it straight up didn't work unless you also activated the legacy input, which is kind of silly because you are using the new input. There was
I've
also
had collisions
something.
too. I was going to say probably the collisions as well. Like sometimes, I don't know if you've had this, but sometimes you'll update a version and it'll try to pull down packages, and there's some kind of lock problem. So it'll try to update like the UI or the input system, and it'll still see the old one. It'll lock the files and not let you change it. It'll throw exceptions, and all of a sudden it won't compile. And because it won't compile, you'll get 100 errors saying Unity can't compile or Unity can't build, and you're like, all I did was update. Nothing has changed, and yet I now have to close the editor, open it, sometimes delete the library directory, all just to get back to where I was before I started working.
There was also the case of new windows or new window identities. So if you had the editor open in a certain setup and then you open a new project with the updated packages, your entire layout is gone and you have to start rebuilding it. All in all, it's generally small differences, and mainly if you upgrade an existing project, but there is still a danger of the version straight up not working as expected if it's not LTS, and sometimes even if it is an LTS.
Best piece of advice: if you're going to update, back the hell up. Back
Use
everything
source
up. Make
control,
sure you've checked
right?
everything in. Yeah, use source control because you'll get burned so badly if you don't.
Definitely. That's one of the things we'll be talking about today too, because the source control system is one of the things that's been changing quite a bit recently. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to that. One thing I wanted to mention real quick before we dive into the list, because the list is big. There was a question about overclocking for game development, and I think we briefly mentioned talking about that. You're going to get, Jason said, weird stuff happening and things happening that are unexpected. If you start overclocking your game dev system, that is also very likely to happen. You're going to get weird results and unexpected problems occurring that may be related to your overclocking and not necessarily your code. At least that's been my experience in the past. When I was working on Vanguard, I had that exact problem. Overclocking was causing some problems and making me debug things that weren't actually bugs. It was actually my computer just screwing up. So I would avoid overclocking on a dev system in general. I don't know about you guys. Do you guys overclock your development systems, or how do you feel about that?
I gladly overclock anything I can, but I test the hell out of it as I start, and I make sure it's within relatively small improvements so that nothing crazy would happen. Generally, there's nothing bad about making your system faster, except when you're trying to test worst case scenarios. Granted, most of Unity has tools for it, so you can set, say, a maximum FPS of 10, so it doesn't matter how fast your rig is, you can always test your game at 10 FPS. You don't have that if you're making your own engine. For example, Terraria, we're using XNA, and there is no easy setting to just limit your FPS nicely. We actually do our own FPS counting too, so there's that. But generally, I think there is merit in having a faster system, specifically if you're importing a lot of assets or doing expensive queries over time.
You think you get an actual performance boost? Well, in my experience, what I've seen is that since stuff is so fast, like I could overclock and get a 3 to 5% performance boost, but I'm not going to actually notice it. I guess it's things have gotten so fast for me on most stuff that I work on that any performance boost that's not like 100% is going to be hard to notice. A smaller, like a 20-30% performance boost on things isn't something I'm going to see because my builds take, a couple seconds. They don't take half an hour anymore. And importing things takes a couple seconds and doesn't take hours anymore. So
that's what my unsatisfying answer is going to be too. I was going to say, look, for some people, dev is a hobby. They're kind of doing it as an interesting thing, or they want to get into games. For a lot of us here, we've been doing development on a development machine for so many years that if you're going to spend money on anything, it's going to be on the thing that you spend 90% of your time sitting at. So all of us probably have pretty good rigs. And the truth is, like once you're paying in the N thousands for your computer, overclocking isn't really going to get you that much for like what I'm doing. My computer already has all of the things, all of the numbers set to as much as I could for the defaults. I don't need to overclock. There's it's overkill at that stage. Even for video editing, like I video edit 4K video and I scrub the wheels full real time, and it doesn't bother me. Like there's no need for me to overclock anything.
I had a project. Sorry, I just want to say I had a project where A friend gave me that, and I was like, okay, I'll just import it. The process took 5 hours. So there are things that will get faster if you have a better machine or a better setup for it, for these kinds of things.
Yeah, I make sure I spend a ton of money on my dev machine, and then I've got 2 Titan X SLIs in SLI on this. So yeah, and I have a couple of extra machines that I do for my testing. And this is something to note: when you're going to release your game, most people aren't going to have their computers overclocked. So when you're try and test on some machines, borrow off friends and all the rest. Test on some machines that are sort of standard, sort of middle line, so you can and go to worst case scenarios if you want, and make sure your game runs on those quite well. So if you've only got one machine, then have a think about when you're overclocking.
And this is, it's not really about performance, but please, for the love of God, this is just one thing that drives me so insane. Resolutions. Please check what widescreen resolution your project looks like. And for no other reason than it's really, really tacky looking when you've got a game and you're hiding UI elements off screen to slide in, and someone's using an ultra wide, and all of your like in waiting disabled UI elements are in the sidebars, and it looks really tacky. So just like try it on different resolutions, please.
Yeah, I use an ultra wide, and I see that so often.
Yeah, we got to find some examples of that.
About that, there's actually the Unity device simulator that lets you see the device in all the different resolutions and just choose the one that matches the device that you want to test.
Yeah. So let's get started with this list of new Unity features. Again, if anybody's got anything really interesting you want us to talk about on the Unity features, or something you're just kind of curious about, we'll make sure we dive into, drop it in the chat or comments. And if you're watching this live or later, hit the like button and subscribe and all that stuff so you can see the next episode. So I'm going to flip a view here so we can actually see kind of a quick list here. And I figured we'd just start going through some of the new stuff in the latest version and then jump back into some of the bigger things in the previous version. And then I guess as we go through, if anything stands out, we'll just call it out and have a bigger discussion on it. One of the first things was this new 2D template. I think it was the first thing on the list. And I saw this, but it wasn't something that I've played with a lot. And I was kind of curious if any of you guys have really dug into the 2D renderer setup. I mean, there's the systems there, it's easy to switch to, but have any of you guys really taken advantage of or understand or able to explain why people would care about using the 2D renderer that maybe are building 2D projects in Unity?
Yeah, sure. So in Relogic, we actually use the 2D renderer to try and make new prototypes of things, experimenting. And one of the things that you'll find with the legacy 2D rendering is that you were kind of limited in many of the features. The feature set wasn't as big. One of the biggest changes with the 2D renderer is that you get the benefits of shader graph, the 2D lighting, and some other small tools to offer better experiences with it. There's actually a huge 2D renderer project on the Unity Asset Store that's from Unity Technologies that you can check out in your free time, because it has a lot of really nice things that you'd expect from a AAA 2D game.
Yeah, I mean, before this, I guess the previous one would use the built-in renderer in 2D mode, and then to get to this, you had to use URP and then essentially go through the process of swapping out the renderer to the 2D one. So it seems like they've just simplified it, which to me means that they probably feel like the 2D renderer is solid and ready to be like the default primary one, and not confusing and no bugs or issues anymore, right? Like it's just probably quite a bit more stable. And the last time I used it, it felt that way. So I assume that's the case. Anybody have anything else to talk about on this 2D renderer?
I just want to say that the light shapes specifically are a huge change compared to previously. If you wanted that kind of thing, you just had to work with light cookies, and it was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
I haven't really used it myself. I'm curious.
Out like a glider, right?
What?
I was just saying with those lights are the ones that you draw out like the points like a collider, and then you basically draw out the area that's lit up, right?
Yeah, and you can also set how smooth it is and a bunch of other settings, and you can even make light layers. It's really fun.
So what if you're making 2.5D stuff? Because I haven't really used that much at all.
So generally speaking, 2.5D is just 3D with the scale.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Would it be a pain to switch if you were working on 2D render and then you decided later on that you're moving your art style to 2.5D? How much work is in it for you there? You know,
I mean, you'd be reauthoring all your assets.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Well, I mean for the background, right? Like, so to put things in context, there are some games out there which use like, you know, their characters are all 2D, or they're even using 2D colliders for 3D assets or whatever. But the background can be, you know, for depth and scale, you might use 3D just for the environmental stuff. You know,
you can do that in the 2D renderer. I think. I don't think that was prevented. You can set fallback renderer for URP after the 2D one if it doesn't render too. There's like the whole renderers list, and you can set renderers for different stuff.
Right, so let's go on to the next one on here for 2D, which was being able to define scriptable tools for the tile palette window. I don't think there's a whole lot to say about that. For most people haven't probably used the tile palette, but we'll talk more about the scriptable tool stuff in a minute, because I think that's going to be one of the bigger features. Unless there was something really interesting there you guys had. I assume not, though.
I have a use case, but I have not tried it yet, so I don't know if it's actually going to work out. Anybody want to talk or? Okay, no. I guess I'll go with it.
I think Jason's fallen off.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just talk about this. But when you're working on 2D tile things, in Terraria, we have a lot of tile variations. So let's say there's a dirt block, and even though there are settings for, say, a dirt block near two other dirt blocks, so it's going to look like a floor, there are still 3 variations of that same dirt block that you're going to have to place. So if you do a whole line of it, it doesn't look like you don't see a repeating pattern. And one of the problems with the 2D tile palette is that you cannot do that easily right now. But if you can make your own tools, you should be able to add the option to add the variations like that. So that's just one immediate use case that I can think of.
Nice.
There are also things for slopes compared to edge blocks that happen in some games where you want to be able to play slopes, but if you're using auto tiling, which will let you paint tiles easily, you cannot actually make it blend with anything else except itself. So this would be another thing where you can make a custom tool that will actually let you do both slopes and edge blocks with blending.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't dug much into the tile stuff at all, so I'm glad somebody here has some experience with it. I played with it a little bit when it came out, but just didn't have a use case. For some reason, Learn to Code really wants us to say his name. Interesting. Watching chat. Sorry, my internet keeps dropping out. And I wanted to go through some of these Android ones next. Is there anything in the Android specific stuff that you guys were interested in? Personally, I don't do a lot of Android builds lately, so nothing really stood out, but I was curious if there was anything Android specific that seemed cool in here or useful, or maybe even in the latest versions. Has anything really changed, or is it just little fixes? I'll take that as a no. And I assume that's probably the case for most of the people watching and listening, that they're not doing Android builds or they're not doing iOS builds. Or if they are, these are things that they're like waiting for. In my experience, when I was doing mobile stuff, if there was a mobile feature I was waiting for, I knew when it was coming out, like what version it was supposed to come out. I knew when it got delayed to the next version and got mad about it. And it would be very up to date on it. So usually when I see those things, I'm just going to scan through like any of those, something that I used to be interested in and forgot about. And most of the time it's not. So let's move on to the asset pipeline stuff. So they made some changes to the asset importer and added some new messages, an activity window that tells you how long things took to import. Like when you've got these big, long 5-hour asset imports. I don't run into those anymore either. But have you noticed this? Or I guess, did you import a big project into here, Uri? Or anybody?
So I imported a huge project, and obviously I had a giant window telling me I'm going to have to wait 4 to 5 hours, or rather, not telling me, just showing me random useless things without a time prediction, which is not ideal. I don't have much to say aside I'm excited to see if allowing the importing in parallel, if it's going to actually be a good change or if there's going to be any issues on the way with it. Because the last time I trusted Unity to do something in parallel, I ended up waiting more than I had to without.
Interesting. Yeah, this is one of the things I've been waiting for the longest, the just parallel asset imports, because when I have had long imports, it's always because there's just tons and tons of big art that just takes forever. So did you try re-importing after enabling the setting?
Not yet. One thing that I did want to bring up is that it's good that they set it off by default, because there are a lot of projects that will allow you to change the import form, like adding new steps to it. And if those don't support dethreading, then you're going to run into order issues or the process using statics and then killing itself off, etc., etc. So it's good that it's off by default, and be very careful if you're using external assets that change how things import about enabling this.
It's a very good point. One of those things that could break. Was anybody else excited for this? I remember seeing this thing at Unite years and years ago and just being super excited that it was going to make my life easier.
Yeah, I have huge assets. Anybody that comes onto the team or anything like that, it takes forever, and it'd be nice just to get them done quicker. Yeah,
that's a standard thing. Yeah, if it just works, I don't want to have to turn something on in order to do it, because to me that feels like maybe it doesn't work or something. If it really worked well, then it should just be on by default. But yes, just now uploading, the new version takes a while, and then audio as well. I don't know if I'm guessing this doesn't touch audio, but audio always takes a long time to import as well.
Yeah, my understanding was that you'd just be able to get in and work while it imported in all the art assets that you just weren't using yet. So that way you could start using your project in the first few minutes and then let it do all the rest of the assets
as you need them. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing I think is honestly part of the problem, is that I just don't think this solves my problem, which is the amount of times you install packages or assets that have millions of models of things. Or as I recently added one of Andrew's packages, which has millions upon little icons of little avatar faces. I just want to pick one face, but there's no utility for me to decide to pull in a whole load of assets in a side folder and treat it like a little library. I think all of this stuff is like, it's nice, but like from a value add perspective, if there was something of the equivalent of Adobe Bridge, something where you could say download package in little waiting room, where you could then peruse it, pick stuff, and then export Unity packages from it into my project, that would be a million times more valuable than almost everything else I see here, because I think everybody's had that. Big assets they want to import and take pieces out of. The only reason my models take a long time to load in is because the modelers I work with download entire Unity packages just to get one or two trees out of it or something, and I have to now, as part of the GitHub project or whatever, have tons of extra content that'll eventually get stripped from the project that wouldn't be an issue in the first place if it was just pulled to the side and I could only pull in the one or two things I want. So yeah, it's hard to get excited about features which feel like band-aids to something else that isn't really a problem.
Yeah, I mean, when you download a package, you can select in the tick boxes, but it'd be nice if when you see something like an FBX that you want, you tick it and it goes, well, this relies on all these. And do you want to import those as well? And you tick that and it brings in all the other assets that actually that FBX relies on to run. So you don't have to import the 15 other FBXs that are going to take forever to come in.
Well, I even mean like the way you can go into prefab mode and view a single model It would be nice if you could drop a load of stuff into a waiting area and select load these 4. I could spin around, look at them, see if I want them, turn them off, and then like pick through, rather than saying, oh, I'm going to build a meta file and perform an import on the 5 million assets you just dropped in, when you only installed the package because you want to look at the 5 rocks and pick which rock you want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not a very satisfying workflow.
And even on the asset store, you've got preview stuff there. So you can because it can say what's in this download, and you can actually look at all the various files that are going to come in, and it has some preview points in there. Just extend that further and put it on the computer. Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah.
So I've highlighted here in the patch notes something that's not exactly that, but gets part way, and it was at least half of one of the sentences that you listed, which is now in the package manager, they added an option to add a package to a brand new project. So you can basically dump it into a temp project and look at it. And it just creates a new project with that asset in it to go try it out.
Yeah, so I do that already. But yeah, like here's again a classic example. You want to download some music for your project, and so you've bought one of those Uber mega packs with 5 million songs, and you're like, cool, I want to listen to the 5 horror themed tracks in this giant asset pack. And you have to go through the whole process of pulling a lot of that stuff in, and then either know the names already or pull them in, wait for it to build all the stuff, all the meta files, all the structure, and then all I do is delete all of that stuff, take the WAV files, put it in a folder elsewhere, and then use something like Soundly to manage it. So I have to go through all of these steps when all I want is just give you the raw files out of this, put them over here, and stop going through your build process. So yeah, again, I can't get too excited about this sort of limited feature.
I do want to bring up that you should be grateful that Unity at least lets us see the raw files, because in Unreal everything is a U asset and the yeah, everything is wrapped, so you can't even explore it without Unreal.
Yeah. So, well, it looks like they've added quite a bit in here. So maybe some of these other features will come as well. But I was just happy to see the button in there to just create a new temporary project. I want to actually go through and try that out, because that is something that I do a lot, and usually I end up making a new project, opening it, and then finding the asset. So I can turn that down to a single click to just test out an asset. It definitely make me test out packages and assets a lot more, I think, just because I can kind of click on them and speed that process up. But it would be nice to be able to just dig through the assets, kind of like I said, in a project or a prefab editor mode view, kind of, and just pull out the things that you want.
Yeah,
Totally
I mean, a lot of times when I'm doing things like Jason was talking about with the music or audio, where it's just thousands of files, I'll download it in a separate project, and then I'll just pull all that audio out and stick it in a folder that I call library on my D drive. And then when I want audio in the future, I'll just go into that and look through, because those packages barely ever get updated. Yeah. And then I just basically pick my audio out and that, and then I can just have a previewer going that I can actually listen to the audio in sequence and go, okay, I want that. And then I just copy and paste that into the projects as I want it.
Oh, I do the same thing, but the argument is, so when you first click it,
you shouldn't have
to. Yeah, but even if you did, even when you do put it in, it's going to say, oh, here's a load of audio files. Let's go through the asset importer for each and every one of these first before you can copy your folder and drag it in, you know?
Oh, yeah. It's an absolute pain.
That would be neat if Unity had like an online library that you bought something, it went to this online place where you could just, like browsing any audio library out there, click them and listen to them. And then if you have the entitlement through Package Manager or the Asset Store, you can import directly into Unity, so that when you buy something, you don't have to do any of the import process. It just suddenly shows up, sort of in my assets type of situation. And then you can choose from there whether you want to import it.
And again, it's really weird because there's hints of each of these features there. It's like when you do the search box, and if you type a word into the search box, you can click the assets one, and they I don't know if it's still there anymore, but they used to have the button to search on the asset store from the search box in the hierarchy. In the project view, rather, you type in a thing and do a search. It would search the asset store, show you icons, let you pick one. Now, I never used it because it was really nebulous, and you're searching through random assets, some of them with different prices. But yeah, it's weird how there's like half of each of these features there somewhere.
There is one note I'd like to say about consistency for the sake of playing devil's advocate. When someone uploads something to the asset store, they kind of want to be able to expect that everything works as intended. So uploading one file and somebody downloading one file, there is merit to the consistency of it. Importing and just picking specific assets, that's a different story, and I do fully agree that you should be able to do it without all the nebulous steps that Unity makes you wait through. But for the sake of the asset upload, there is some merit in having to download the entire thing first.
I can see that if there were different SKUs. The problem is that there's only one type of package, a Unity package. There's not this package is a package of settings, or this package is a package of textures, or this package is a package of audio, in which case you could have different setup and configuration so that as things come in, they could be managed differently. But because everything is a bundle of files and folders, there's no way for you to structure and handle them differently. And so even if it was just that, this is not meant to be processed. This is meant to be like access to files. They could be approached differently. Like again, even another one being the slightly roundabout solution that Andrew has, which works, but it's a bit frustrating, is when you buy a bulk pack of all the different individual avatar images, you can either buy them separately or buy the bunch pack, but then to get the bundle pack, you're downloading a thing which gives you a file, which gives you access to linking to other things, which gets you download that. It's like, it just, it's got issues, that's all I'm saying.
Speaking of, I've seen some assets on the store that let you buy a bundle that has like no files in it, and it just gives you all the assets for free now. So that's a new, interesting way to distribute the smaller packs.
The bundle system. Yeah, it's been helpful as a publisher, that system, because previously there's I think it's 6 gigabytes now is the limit to how large a file can be, because you have to download the entire thing even if you only want one part of the asset. So I was never able to create a bunch of monster bundles, 4 characters in one purchase, because of that limit. Because inevitably I would just 2 or 3 of them would go over that limit with the high-res textures, with sound effects, music, and all that stuff. And so now that the bundle system allows me to have an empty project that essentially you buy the character pack or the bundle, and then you go to each individual ones and buy them for free. That's allowed me to create bigger bundles that I wasn't able to create before.
The other one too is the common problem with render pipelines, right? They're so vastly different that depending on what you're doing, you might want to provide different entire sets of textures and things. And it's kind of frustrating that a solution that people are picking is to make Unity packages that are in a package, that you download the package and extract the package you want, when it would be really nice if you could, as a creator of an asset, you could upload the thing and then say, here's the version for each different, like you can with platforms when you make builds. What if I could just have a version that's a SKU of my product that's like, this is the one for this pipeline or whatever? Then I wouldn't have to come up with some nebulous way of tying things together and using preprocessor directives or different shader categories, and hopefully, it's annoying.
And literally had to deal with that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it'd be great if on the asset store they actually had tick boxes for URP, HR, DP. The amount of times I go onto something and I download it and I'm like, oh, none of this is supported in URP. I have to go in and make changes to it and all the rest. And sometimes you read the description. Some of the really good asset uploaders have ticked that or basically written in the description, this supports this, this supports this. But a lot of times you're rolling the dice and saying, am I going to be making changes? And then you download it and you find they wrote all their own shaders for it. And you're like, oh, right, okay, now I'm not using any of those. And this asset is worth half the amount of what I actually wanted it for, because I'm having to do all this work to get it up to date. So it'd be great if they had tick boxes for that. And then, having to download something that also has zip files that have the HRRP and the URP thing, that then you open that, it's a nightmare. It's a mess. They need to fix it.
There is something that I've seen lately going in the store where there is a tab for a foldout that says this is compatible with built-in URP, HDRP on almost every recent asset, but not the older ones. And some of these still don't specify which version of URP, HDRP it is, so the asset might still break. It's frustrating as heck. Also, yesterday I imported the VFX package into one of my test projects, and it didn't work because I had to go and download a separate material changer for built-in into URP because I was using URP. So it wasn't even in the package. I had to go and download it separately.
That's the the foldout you're talking about is from the new publisher portal backend. There's a new version that they're working on and a old version. And if you use the new version, you'll get the fancier foldouts and stuff. But that does require publishers to upload, because I mean, I think, if somebody put up a package in 2016 and they've never updated it, I mean, first of all, it might work in URP and HDRP, but that's the other big thing, is whether something works natively out of the box in URP and HDRP, or whether it's just compatible with, like, my stuff I ship in built-in because that's the base. You can always upgrade to the other two, but it's much harder to go the other direction. So I say, yes, they work in HDRP because they won't break your HDRP project, but you will have to manually set up those materials.
And that's
same with
perfectly
URP.
That's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really for the packages that have their own custom shaders that just won't work in those. And it's the ones where I've had a lot of guns and stuff in some of the projects, and they have a lot of decals on them, and they write all their own decal shaders. And then you bring them in, and none of those are working. And you have to either convert them or have your own and then convert it all over into your own shaders and make all the differences, which in the end of the day, I tend to anyway, because I don't want a ton of different shaders in my projects, 15 different decal shaders running. No, I'm good with having it all bundled into a couple. But yeah, good point.
So one thing
You guys
that's
want to jump on to some of the other... I got dropped.
you're a bit roboty. So I guess I'll just talk about one of these changes while you're resolving it. One of the things that's standing out here is the macOS adding deep linking support. That's something that I don't see coming up often at all in almost any development topic. We can hear you now a bit better. So on deep linking, I know that Jason Story, you actually worked on deep linking in some project before, right?
Yeah, I've had a few cases where it's useful to be able to open up various different things.
Yeah. So to those who don't know what deep linking is, because it's not mentioned often in the game development industry, at least, it's when you allow a specific extension type to be opened with a specific tool natively, as far as I understand the concept. I never had to actually deal with it myself, but there are a lot of times where even just opening a Unity package, you need this in order to have something happening nicely.
I think a practical example, so if people aren't really understanding the concept, you've used these even if you don't think about it. Every time you've bought a game on Steam and it says, do you have Steam installed? And you press the button and it magically somehow opens Steam, goes to it and starts the process of downloading. Or Slack or Skype or something where you press a button and it starts a call.
The Unity asset.
GSR, sometimes that works too. So basically it's a unique resource identifier that's basically like a link, and you can have a URL. And what's cool is, just like if you've ever done REST APIs and things, you can have resource parameters. So you can basically say, here's a URL that says my application, and I've registered these variables. So my application, some room name, and maybe even a password or something. You can now create a link that lets people join a lobby to a game, or create a link that will open up a certain tab in your application or go to a certain window. You have to manually do all of it yourself, but the point is you can listen for and respond to fired events from the operating system of type URL plus parameters, which it can be pretty powerful.
Yeah, and to note, you can set a lot of that up in your registry editor. So when you actually do an installer, you can set all the deep links and everything for your registry editor to actually pump this stuff up. So you can create all your own deep links and have them do things in your Windows system, which is super cool.
And if you want to go really crazy with it, because they're just basically registering certain file formats, you can create your own file format and register a file format with your own open tools. And so if you create your save files are managed with a particular .save extension that's not a default. If you do .sav, you might collide with someone else's. But if you have your own unique, acronym for your thing, you can register in that operating system that when you double click it, it opens the app and loads that save. Now, I've never done that because it's silly, but the point is you could theoretically do that.
Yeah,
There's even
passing around seeds to your games. If you've got a seed that generates your game and you want to pass it to somebody else, you can make a little seed file, and when your game installs, you can have it register that seed file extension, and boom, open up the seed file rather than type stuff in. Sorry, here you go.
Yeah, there's even something more interesting that I've seen recently in GTC. There was one studio who talked about in their own editor, they had the ability to right-click and copy a link to seeing a specific field of a specific asset and just sharing that with the other developers. And here, this is what's not going right. Can you look into this? They just click it and immediately can go and see it. This is like amazing, and I hope Unity has something like this in the future.
Yeah, when I was a tools programmer at Sony, we used to use deep linking all the time for people to pass stuff across so it would open up various aspects of their editors, etc. Like shelving before Perforce had shelving. We had items to do that sort of thing with deep linking. It's really good fun. I actually had an argument with Oculus about this because I wrote a VR real estate application, and I wanted Oculus to add deep linking from websites into the actual application you had, and they wouldn't do it. Some security thing, but I didn't care. I wanted deep linking.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and I've worked on client projects where they did a similar thing, where they had like a storefront, and they wanted you to be able to click inside the VR application and then buy something on their store. And so you can kind of do it in both directions, where you could theoretically open a VR app to a certain location, or you could click a link in a web browser and effectively launch the browser on the operating system to go to whatever. Obviously, that's much easier. That's not deep link. That's just like a process start. But the point is the same. Like, you get to work in both directions, and you can do some really nice interop between different things.
Yeah.
So if I don't get disconnected real quick, I was curious on the input system one. Has anybody switched over to using the new input system that's now released as 1.1? Is it like your
finally? Yeah,
I've got a lot of hands here. So everybody but Andrew?
I haven't done it yet. Old version of Unity.
I was kicking and screaming though.
Yeah.
It took me some time. I swear. Like, I was like, I fought as long as I could not to use it, and I still don't like having to. But it's at the point now where it's like there's a 50% chance the thing I install or the asset or the template's going to have it, and I've written my own like code now, which is agnostic to which type it is. So and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. But basically, the idea that if I have a script that has input for a camera control, for example, I can drop that script into either version, whether it's using the old input system or the new input system, and it'll use the preprocessor directives to correctly use the right section. Because it's just too frustrating now to have to live with like rewriting code just because you change the input provider. So,
yep, I put a wrapper on it. I've been using it for a good while, but I put a wrapper on it immediately because they were changing it so much. But yeah, intermediate file for other people, intermediate class. But yeah.
I've been using it since 0.96, and I've been updating it every single time that I can. And I've tried to make a pull request for the package to add some new features, and I have messed with every little bit of source code in it just to try and see how far I can push it. But I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I can wholeheartedly recommend using it if you're deciding. I will say it's annoying that you have to disable the old input, and some assets are playing will my project break once I press play after you import them because they had some debug keys that use the legacy input system or whatever.
Can you not
back your project up before you do it? No, you can't enable them both. Back your project up before you do it.
Wait, since when couldn't you enable them both?
There is a toggle that you can use both.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, right. I don't.
Yeah. In settings, there's a drop. It'll when you switch from the old to the new, it'll automatically force you to only new. But there is a drop down option that will allow both to be running. But then you are running two input systems.
Okay. Well, there you go. Learn something new. I don't. I just went for it and killed it off and went to the new one.
I will say though, here's a tip for people because switching is going to be difficult because it's a whole new paradigm. It's not like some of the other Switch stuff where like for all the complaints with the new render pipelines, you can pretty much bring in a new pipeline, and if you're not doing anything clever, it'll kind of just work. Aside from the other messing, obviously you can mess with it if you're doing anything fancy. With the input system, there's no corollary out of the box. Like input.get button, there isn't a new input.get button. That doesn't exist the same way. You have to use keyboard.current some key was pressed this frame or what. It's like a whole load of it's convoluted. So there is a bit of learning. But I would say if you're getting started, even though the correct way to use it is a lot with the whole like the assets and creating the user actions and whatever, to get yourself started, if you want to take an old script you wrote and make it work, don't bother going that crazy with it. Just write keyboard.current or mouse.current. That'll get you that's a quick way to bridge and fix an old script to work with the newer system. Then you can do your research and look into how to do all of the assets and whatever.
And it's going to give you a lot of new flexibility with features, like you can add local multiplayer in like 10 minutes flat, and even less. And there's a lot of other small things like touch inputs on screen. They have components for it out of the box. I will say there are some things that are struggling. The system is fighting against itself there because it's acting as a Unity package and not Unity source code. So, for example, it has some things that work with the Unity UI system, but some things will struggle against the Unity UI system in it. So,
and one thing though that is really nice is, I will say, one thing I really loved out of the box, it was pretty easy for me to set up icons that will show the keyboard keys that I'm pressing. But if I pick up the gamepad and press a button, I can have all of my icons update to whatever the new platform device is. Now, again, that's not out of the box per se, because they don't really have an asset to do that. They have an example scene which does that. I just did my own. But if you just have a scriptable object of your own, which has a list of all of your sprites you're using, there is an easy event to basically say, has it changed whatever binding or mapping you're using? You can then auto swap all your icons, and it's quite easy. So that's really satisfying to see when you like walk up to something and it says press E key, and then you pick up the gamepad and press a button and it says press A button. It's like, oh, nice, I like that. So that's pretty quick thing to set up.
I do that in Monkeys with Guns, a little 2D platformer I'm creating with a friend of mine. And you could switch all the icons. Go back to the local multiplayer. The only annoying thing is if you've got two people using the same keyboard, you actually have to do some abstraction work to have the input system work with that, which, it's not super hard to do, but yeah, you have to have that rather than the old system where you would basically just take the input.get key.
Oh, and the PS5 controller still has issues. Now, if you use PS4, it works fine. If you plug in PS5 controller and just leave it stationary and look at the read, because they have their own thing, this input profiler that shows you all the events. If you just put a PS5 controller down and plug it in, it starts going crazy. It thinks buttons are being pressed. It thinks stuff is happening. And then if you press like the square button, it presses 3 different buttons, and some of the hat and axes don't work. It's insane. It's like, I don't know why this is still an issue, but like, you cannot use a PS5 controller with that input system because it doesn't understand what buttons are being pressed.
It's always been an issue. Like every new console generation, it takes like 3 years before Unity supports those controllers. I mean, it happened with the Xbox One as well, way back in the day.
It's only supported on the actual platform, not on PC. So you guys are all using that system. I guess it's time for me to upgrade too. And probably everybody else. Real quick, before we leave the input system, when you set it up now, does it have a bunch of nice defaults or match similar defaults to what were in there? Or do you still have to go through and manually create each axis and each button from scratch? Do you end up
in the package manager? Some of the packages actually have samples that set up a lot of defaults for you. For instance, there's the OpenXR package. If you go in there, there's a samples option, and then in that samples option, it sets all the controllers up for you for the sample, and then you could just rip those off and extract those out to something else.
But if you're brand new, the easiest starting point is just to add the package, create any UI element, click on your event system. Your event system will freak out. It'll tell you, this doesn't work. I can't do this anymore. God help me. And there'll be a big button that says fix. And you click that, and it will then fix that and also create you your starting asset, which does include basic navigation and a player, which has... Yeah, and it even has a player one now with like left click, right click, and WASD. So that's the quickest way if you just want to say, how do I get this vaguely back to working again?
So
that's
I'll
perfect.
cut you a step down from that. It doesn't actually create an asset; it assigns it from within the package, and you can actually open it up, copy the contents of it, and make your own map and paste that in. You don't even have to go through the adding a UI element.
That is what I tend to actually do, because I don't like to edit it while it's in the package. So I will actually copy that asset, paste it into my directory, rename it something, go click on the C# class generator and have it generate the class for that object, and then I start playing with the bindings and all that stuff. But that's a little bit more convoluted if you have to know where it is and what you're doing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you can't even change things within the packages, because as soon as you close the editor and open it, it will re-import the package and all your changes are wiped.
Yeah.
It sounds like everybody should try this thing out though and jump over to 1.1, or at least give it a try it out in their project. So, what other things do we have here? There was a lot of mobile changes. It looks like they've added some performance things and support for new stuff. Anything in the mobile section that was of interest to any of you guys that you felt like was worth calling out? If not, I'm ready to jump down into mono and package manager stuff. Take that as a no. Usually that's kind of what I would expect, that people aren't going to be super excited about mobile enhancements,
Well-
unless again they're working on a project that needs that actual feature.
Well, I
Okay,
mean,
so
conceptually, I just want to touch on that, but conceptually, we're all here probably trying to abstract how much we work for a specific system. So there will be very limited amounts of specific code or integrations or carrying for those features, because we're like, okay, I have this system and all it changes for me is just the UI and how I import things. So those systems have some abstraction implementations for each platform, and the rest I don't care.
Yeah, it has been a long time since I've built for one exact platform specifically, and it was Oculus. It was specifically back when Oculus had a lot of annoying, nuancy stuff you had to do, and their bindings were different than the XR ones and whatever. But since then, it's usually you try your best to make it multi-platform. So yeah, a lot of this stuff doesn't super apply.
So the mono behavior or mono updates that were in here, there wasn't a whole lot. They added some compression for Windows, which I'm not even completely sure what that does. But then they did a recent upgrade to the latest mono version. Anyone know if that had any significant impacts? They don't really call anything out here, so I didn't know if there was anything even important about this, or what the important part here was. Anybody know about this, or anybody in chat?
I assume this is only for people who have access to the source code of Unity, big projects and the likes. I have not actually seen anything that benefits from this from the outside.
Okay, well, at least it wasn't just me. And then it looks like they did quite a bit around the package manager. So one of those things was the option to just install a package into an empty project, and then a couple other things to, it looks like, locking down packages and setting up feature sets. And I haven't played with the feature sets, but it sounds kind of like this addresses one of the things that we were talking about earlier, where you upgrade a Unity version and all the package versions change and stuff. It sounds like maybe this lets you lock in package versions. Is that accurate? Has anybody played with this?
It
So
seemed
instead of that, it's more like it's a set of packages that you're saying, well, I am going to work on a 2D game. Give me the 2D tile sets, the PSD importer, the 2D advanced tile sets, because there's 2 packages for it, and all the other related contents with one click. So this is the feature set for 2D, use that. Or this is the feature set for building your open world, whatever thing. I think you can make your own feature sets too.
That's why I haven't used it, but my understanding was it seemed like almost a bundle of, I want to make this kind of game, so give me everything I need to make that kind of game. And while, right now it seemed fairly straightforward for 3D, 2D, etc., you could imagine like, okay, in the future, I want to make an MMO, a 3D MMO in VR. So give me everything I need for MMO, 3D, VR, all in one go, and just one click to install all of it.
Yeah, it's bundling. It's like when you select to have a template when you open Unity, like you're going to go URP or you're going to go one of the other things. It installs a lot of stuff. I feel like this package features is that, but without all the samples as well. You can open a brand new Unity and you can basically press on that package feature set and it brings it down without all the samples.
Well, I think as as people already know, because it's literally the first video I ever made on my YouTube channel, I bypass all this anyway because I'm just not a fan of the way packages work. In general, like every time you have to do the search in that package manager tool, it searches for all the new ones, gets the latest version, spends forever doing it. And if you accidentally search in the in project or my assets instead of the packages and you click the button and it wipes everything you've just done, you have to do a research again. There's so much tediousness where at the end of the day, all it's doing is writing a single entry to a text file. It's so convoluted and unnecessary for something that could just be a few lines of text. And so I understand why it's a good idea that they're trying to find different ways to do this. But I only see two scenarios. Either it's your first time building a project of this type, in which case you probably shouldn't be kitchen sinking a bunch of assets you don't know if you'll need yet, or you do it so often that whatever feature set they give you probably won't be your specific preferences. Like, for example, I use the 2D PSD importer on all my 3D projects because there's a lot of really good tools for using the PSD files for your UI elements. And so, like, they're not going to include that in the 3D template, most likely. So I consider it much easier to just write down your own packages, make a text file, store it on somewhere, and then pull it down and either replace the file or you can actually call all of those package tools yourself and just pull them in. And so if you want to see me do that, I've got 2 videos covering the rough topics of what I just described there on my YouTube channel. But yeah, I just find if you're going to customize it, you have to customize it properly, not half customize it based on what they let you do. Because they don't even let you pull in things that aren't in the package manager. So if you want to add your own Git entries, you can't do that. And so I use other things that aren't part of the Git packages in the package manager. And so I would have to go a different route to go get those anyway. But if you do it yourself, you can add whatever you want into and dependencies too. Here's the other problem. You can't have dependencies on other Git libraries. If you have a Git library, you make yourself a Git package, you can have references to other Unity packages, but you can't have packages from your Git packages to your own other Git packages. It won't let you. And so it won't resolve those for you, but you could obviously import them yourself. There's a lot of caveats that just make, again, Band-Aid fixes like these not work for me.
Yeah, I'm with something like Yuri said. If you can make your own, then I'm going to be happy with this. I would probably use this just to look and go, oh, I didn't know that package existed, and that's to do with that because there's so many packages now. So I'd look through the ones that they have, but I would never use them. But if I could create my own versions, so if I was doing like a game jam or something like that, and I was like, right, I'm making this sort of game jam, boom, press that, and I get the packages that I want in, then I would use it. But I'm not going to use package feature. But for newbies, I could see how this would really help out.
It does look like it might have some version controlling on there, though. Just I highlighted in here one of the notes on there. It says that they added a warning message if feature set dependencies are already installed with a different version before installing it. So it gives me the sense that this, like, you're assigning a version to this package manager, and if there's a different version installed already, it's going to let you know. It's not just doing latest, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't know that.
No. So every package that is in the package manager has the setting of dependencies. You can actually toggle one of the package manager preferences to see that in your project before you import. This package relies on mathematics, for example. And then if you already have one other package that relied on mathematics, this will tell you you have the package already installed with a different version. It's because a feature set is just a collection of packages, and each package has dependencies, and you have some packages, it can compare those versions of the dependencies. It's not anything specific for it.
But it's not keeping track of which version you actually want in that feature set?
In the feature set, yes, but if you imported something out of the feature set, and then you are importing a feature set with a different version, this will let you know.
Yeah, it seems like something I'm going to need to just play with a little bit and try out. Is there anything else with the package manager that seemed interesting to you guys?
No.
There's a couple changes, but I don't know if there's anything.
Shows your initials now instead of full name. That's nice, I guess.
Yeah, this part, the part showing packages with entitlements and subscription-based licensing, I did notice that when I was going through the package manager. You can actually see if you have one of those assets that's a multi-seat license, it seems like it's keeping track of that now in the package manager, how many seats you have available and how many are actively being used. And you can kind of track that in there. I'm not sure how it works exactly, but I did notice something like that, and it looks like it actually supports it now. built into the manager. So I don't know. That's an exciting thing. It's probably just exciting for asset publishers who are making money off of it to make sure they keep making their money off of it.
Yeah, it's a
everybody
good
else,
thing.
go look
It's a
at
good
it.
thing, but as long as when I go away and I have to use my laptop, I don't have to mess around with the seats completely.
I didn't get the sense that they broke anything. It was just more informative. It wasn't really
Yeah.
like an N4C type thing, just letting you know, hey,
Good.
you might be over. It'll give you a little notification or something. But again, I haven't played with it too much because I'm usually the only one entitled to anything.
Yeah, same here.
All right, so there's only one thing on particles, a mesh weighting field to the list of meshes in the particle systems for people that use particles with meshes, which I guess happens sometimes. And then there was a decent amount of stuff about physics. So anything here in physics, or are you guys really interested in this one mesh system for particles?
They ruined all the fun I had with disabling all the layers.
Oh, the enable and disable all buttons for the layer matrix collision thing.
Yeah, it's a fun joke, but when I'm making projects that don't rely on physics, I will just go ahead and disable everything just to remind myself I'm not going to use physics now. And it's like, this button will ruin all my fun.
Speed it up too much. Anybody find anything else interesting in here? Did anybody play with the custom collider 2D and know how that varies from a like a polygon collider?
No, not yet.
Okay. If anybody in chat happens to know, I'm kind of curious too, because it says it allows you to make custom 2D physics shapes, but you kind of do that. So I'm guessing it's just more advanced than just the basic shape collider there.
The ability to read the low-level things is always nice, because I find myself getting easily frustrated when the physics system doesn't obey my will and call for specific features. There are a lot of tweaks and hacks that games will do to increase player quality of life, and if you're using a physics system, you're inherently losing out all these benefits just for the sake of having proper physics, and it's something that I hate to do. So when a game lets you have, say, a kinematic character that doesn't get affected by the physics system but just affects it, you can write all those features again. But if you could have both being affected and when you need to just hack, this is where I'd look into.
Oh, okay. Just for getting smoother gameplay. I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of games do that too. They just kind of take more direct control, especially 2D games, take a lot more direct control over the player, not just using the 2D physics system most of the time. I feel like people start off with the 2D physics system, get it to a point where the game kind of works, and then they don't like the way it feels, and then go in and start swapping it out and then start to make their own systems. I assume you're kind of at that point where you just love to build your own 2D movement systems and collision systems anyway, though, after working on Terraria for so long.
I wouldn't say that I love it. It's more that I want to have a good experience, and this is the only way.
Prefer it.
Yeah, I prefer having the option to. But if I can get something that works out of the box, I'll happily use it. Otherwise, I'm usually going for kinematic character controllers and simulating most of the features that I need. Regardless whether it's 2D or 3D. Yeah,
there were a couple things added to the profiler, but I don't think there were anything that was super exciting unless there was something that stood out for anyone here.
I mean, asset loading profiler and file access provider can be huge for teams with big projects, but...
Oh, you want to talk a little bit about that? What are those? I didn't actually catch those because I haven't had that problem lately.
Well, as the name implies, an asset loading profiler will let you know what part of the process in loading an asset will take more time or get more complex. And you can see, hey, this asset is taking me a lot of time. Let's figure out why. Oh, suddenly I realize it's 8K when it only had to be 1K, or etc.
Got some giant textures. So does that work for like just loading an asset at runtime from resources or addressables, or is it also from just pulling in a scene and loading a scene? Do you get the breakdown?
I have no idea yet because I haven't tried it, but I'm saying conceptually it sounds amazing because you know some things will take more time than others. In Terraria, we actually had a case where most of our assets are within the 2 kilobyte to 4 kilobyte size, but then there was one asset that was 18 megabytes. And we're like, oh, hey, what the hell happened there? So I appreciate when these things are available, especially when you have 10,000 assets in your game and you don't really want to keep track manually of every single one of them, especially if they're foldered. So you can just do one folder, see all the sizes, etc. Or if it has particularly slow import settings, because you know how textures, for example, have a lot of compression settings that you can set. Those would affect loading times. Or if you have music files, you probably want to send some of them to streaming, because then you don't have to load the entire file at any one point. All of these things kind of matter for that. And for the file access profiler, the thing that comes with it is how many times do you actually make reads to the file, or do you just keep it once in memory and never touch it again, or do you touch it every single frame trying to get 5 things out of it and then closing it down, opening it up, etc., etc. They are important and they get glossed over super easily. Granted, most games don't actually need that much dynamic asset loading.
Right. I feel like this one will let you catch a big mistake that you've made, the file access one. Like you're accidentally writing and reading from a file when you meant to be doing it to memory only, and just hit the wrong path or something in your code. Hopefully. or you just misjudged and decided to write to a file all the time or read from them all the time.
So yeah, that's one of the biggest mistakes that you can make. And there's actually a very fun story that I can share about that regarding Terraria. So when 1.3 update dropped, we had a case of some players reporting extremely low FPS. And we could not catch that for a full 2 weeks until somebody who decided to actually engage in conversation about the bug said that it's only happening when they are running. Their FPS would throttle to like 20 out of 60. And he would run in multiplayer and somebody would run way past him because the FPS was low and the game runs the frame rate, moving you without delta times. We didn't understand what's going on there, and everything we checked in the code made no sense for why this is working. Until it dawned on us. There was one achievement called Marathon Runner, and every step you make counts towards that achievement, the amount of meters that you moved. Now, we don't write to file every single step you make. That would be insane. But there was a pirated version of Terraria that replaced the Steam achievements file with something that tracks it locally and writes to file every single time an achievement changes. So these players who pirated, they had low FPS when they're running, and it wasn't even our fault. We died laughing when we figured that out. And then every single time we've seen that bug, we immediately knew, oh, this is why it's happening.
That is awesome. So they'll put the pirated version writing a file every frame. That's awesome. Yeah. So this is that asset loading profiler. This one, I really want to play with this one. This is, I think, probably more useful for most of the people, especially if it shows it when you actually load into a scene, wondering like why a scene load is taking a long time. You know, you build up a scene with a bunch of stuff in it and it takes a long time to load. I'm guessing that this is going to explain exactly that. So I plan on playing with this thing a lot this week.
Yeah, I can see this being genuinely useful for me. There's been a couple of projects we worked on where we have, for VR, for example, different resolution models for different things. And sometimes we'll accidentally load the one really high poly one. Because oftentimes what we do is we have a model and then we apply a texture on it that sort of hides details anyway. In general, you're better off in VR choosing low fidelity art styles. It just looks better as opposed to trying too hard to be too realistic. And so sometimes a model can slip through the cracks. And so one stage we had a crowd simulation where it was just a whole bunch of people in a riot. And one of the characters in the middle of that whole thing, we'd used like a massively high poly model. And so you've got like 40 characters on screen, and one of them is costing more performance than all of the others combined, and we missed it for a very long time. And it was such an easy win of like, oh, just replace that one character and we get tons of performance back. So something like this would be very handy for that.
Yeah, I'm excited to try it out. So I'll go back and pull back up that list. And before I do, while it's loading, I just want to ask everybody to please hit the thumbs up button if you're still with us live. I've got way more people watching than likes. So it means that either everybody hates the new version of Unity or I just haven't been begging them enough. So I guess that's the end of the profiler stuff. There was one more for connecting remote profilers, but I assume that's a pretty small edge case. I do it on rare occasions. Most people probably never need to worry about it. So there were some things with the scene view and game view and search. I know that there's been a lot changed with the scene view. I almost feel like I should pop up a window that shows and gives kind of an example of what that looks like. But do you guys have you played with the new version of the scene view, the overlays or anything there, or the tools or the customization in there? Because one of the big things is it's customizable. I'm gonna pop up and screen share it real quick. But what do you guys thoughts on this whole
I
new
admit
scene view?
I'm excited with all the options, but I will say they've moved a bunch of stuff and it's completely destroyed years of muscle memory, and it's driving me absolutely insane. Like
Yes.
all of these really simple things, like, oh, I'm going to switch from global to world. Oh, where's that again? Oh, it's this little drop down here. Oh, there it is.
It also takes 2 clicks now for that.
It takes 2 clicks.
Yeah.
That one kills me. That's such a stupid decision between world and local, and you can't even click the icon. You'd assume you could click the icon and have it toggle. There's only 2 options. Why is it a drop down? I don't understand. Yeah, that one in particular drives me nuts.
Why can't you click the icon?
No, top left. That little thing up there. Oh no, the other side. Top left.
The scene view top left.
Oh, that was Gizmo. Oh, this one, yeah.
No.
Keep going. There you go.
Yeah.
Left.
Left.
There you go. That one.
There we go.
There, toggle handle. Click that.
Oh.
Yeah, so we can't see
you've got to be able to assign a key to this, right?
Oh yeah, you can't see the pop. Sorry, I thought you can only see it when it appears. Yeah.
So that's now a double click pop up when you can't. It used to just be a button. You could switch the thing.
I have a feeling that's going to change quick. That probably won't feel like that for long.
Yeah, that's super annoying.
Yeah, but it comes with a lot of feature expansions that are really nice. So let's not ignore that and
the docking windows is really nice. Like even things like the new tools no longer have a really clunky window. Like that's what I was talking about before about Pro Builder. The Pro Builder integration stuff now, or the Pro Grids and stuff, like all of these integrate nicer now in a way that they didn't before, which is really nice. Again, still confusing, and like switching everything to icons that are slightly different now drives me insane. But again, I'll get used to it. It'll just take some time.
Yeah. And one thing I really appreciate is that you can move everything, not just that bar in the top left. You can actually move the any single one of these. Yeah.
I did not
and
realize.
If you look
I didn't know you could move that. That's new to me. I didn't know
you can move the things at the very top. There's a section on the left that you can grab. Yeah, exactly. So you can make it look like any other tool that you're using now. If Blender has some things at the bottom, so you can now do that and match how you do things in Blender, for example, etc., etc. And the reason they did the drop down for those tools is specifically because they're giving you the ability to add an infinite amount of new tools to the editor, and they wanted them to not take infinite space if they're all being used in the same purpose. So they have to go.
Right, but here's the thing: as a hot take,
I agree with you.
As a designer, though, the way you deal with this problem is you check the count, and if it's less, if it's 2 or less, you show as the default. Otherwise, you replace with a dropdown. Very simple. That's how you solve this problem in perpetuity for every single one of these menu items.
Yeah, I'm sure that
I fully agree with you there. Yeah. I think there's going to be something you can set in the shortcuts for toggling.
Yeah, key binding. You're going to have to be able to key bind that, because that's going to kill me.
If we're talking about that, they added the ability to create your own editor context tools now because of all of these changes. And in those editor context tools, they have a method for adding shortcuts. So if you're making your own asset right now and you're making a new feature and you want to have a button to toggle your tool, you can actually do that. You get a method call to see the selections and see if they're valid and whatever you need to do in the tool immediately right there. And my connection is dying, it says.
Oh, actually, speaking of
mine.
shortcuts, here's one. Drives me insane. Another one of these classic Unity fun toys. Pro Builder has shortcuts for switching between vert, edge, and object mode that conflict with existing shortcuts. So you install Pro Builder, you click the button, and it goes, you can't do the thing that this asset's supposed to do immediately, and it's infuriating. Like out of the box using that, it doesn't. Yeah, annoying. I hate it.
I remember that one. Drove me nuts. So I'm really curious on the scene view thing, since we can now create new objects there. Do you guys have any like example ideas for something that would be useful and cool to create? I've thought about like making a video on how to do one, but I can't think of anything worth doing. So I need an example.
Yeah,
Wait,
we
which is
used
this?
to
I have
adding
huge
new
ones.
tools onto it. I mean, we used to write ones that would actually come up in the scene view using the old GUI stuff, and that would be to when we were one that comes to mind is the Bezier curves one, when we were creating curves, roots, and all the rest, and we'd have add or remove options and a few other options in there as buttons that would be in the scene view that you quickly click, and you'd add extra dots and you would move them around and all the rest, and then of course you'd have the handles to manipulate them in the world. That's the one that comes to mind. And we used to do that with the GUI stuff on the scene view. So doing that neatly and nicely, because to make it nice in the old way, it was a pain, just so much code. So hopefully that's better.
Did anyone have any other examples? I'm just trying to think of things that were not necessarily game specific.
So I'm going to ask first if you can hear me okay, because my internet is kind of dropping.
Yeah, you're good.
You're sounding good, yeah. I think the internet's just going out all over the world right now. It's just dropping.
Or restream. So
Everybody
I have
downloading 2012.
So one thing that I've wanted to bring up is that this is a bit very relieving, because you can create editor context tools to show what you previously had on gizmos within the script itself. And this lets you keep the script pure out of having to show anything. You don't need methods for drawing. You don't need using Unity editor, etc., etc. You can put it all in the editor tool context, and it will just work for anything that you're editing.
Well, you could do that before, but you'd have to use the on GUI and on scene GUI functions inside the editor window stuff, and
yeah, it was a mess, but this is way cleaner and shorter now. And this also comes with the added benefit of giving you specific tools for the thing that you're authoring with a lot of ease. That's the official example. I've linked this in the email that we had prior, but they literally show how they're making a moving platform. They're letting you set a start and an end point, and then they're making the tool show gizmo of the way and even a boolean to show the platform moving in real time in the scene view. So even without entering play mode, you can just copy and paste this and just see a moving platform whenever you feel like it. And this,
I like the
this
I
is
like
a lot
the
of
look
quality
of that,
of life.
Yeah, because I've used to have to do that stuff before, but manually. As you were saying earlier, is that, like, for example, one thing I did was a directed graph. So you had nodes in the scene where you had to create the nodes, create the edges. You had an ability to clamp them with the raycast to the nearest surface and basically build yourself a waypoint navigation system. And I had to build the entire editor tooling for that myself, draw the handles, check the selection states, all the stuff. And it's like, if they even just give us the ability to comfortably check the mouse position and selections without doing, checking the selected object, right, drawing your own handles, if even just that stuff's tidied a bit, it'll be a massive quality of life improvement.
So yeah, this entire example is worth looking through, and there's also more on the left on the side of the glossary of all the classes. There's the editor tool context, the game object tool context. Those are also great. The game object tool context is specifically why they did the whole thing with the transform, rotate, scale. That's where this one goes. So you can make your own.
So there is something. There's something in these updates I'm actually excited for. Good, because up to now it's been like, whatever. This one I like. This one is okay. I'll give this one a thumbs up.
Nice.
Yeah,
this one's really cool.
And
this
to add on,
cooler than
and to add on these, they also added the overlays. So now, if you wanted to have, say, an overlay like Assassin's Creed that highlights specific units in their state, like say all hostile units show red, all neutral suspecting units show yellow, all civilians show white, etc., etc. You can now make an overlay, draw what you need in order to get that to happen in the scene view. So you can make a lot of gameplay offering assist tools. Like say, these areas will harm you, these areas will not, etc., etc.
That was a pain. I've actually built all these in editors. So I have icons that come up above the AIs telling you what they're actually doing and stuff as they're running in the scene viewer. And that it's just a pain to write all those gizmos, etc. So this is great.
Yeah, there's a ton of potential here, and I absolutely love this.
Definitely got to dive into all those. I actually just gave myself a note to make an entire video about that setup because it looks really interesting. I think everybody would be excited, and even Jason got excited about it. So maybe Jason will just.
I do want to bring up something slightly related to these, but not directly. This update to Unity also added a Blitter class to the core rendering pipeline package, and that lets you call a lot of methods with more ease for rendering specific things. So this is great to use in tandem with this new feature, I think. I haven't tried it yet, so there might be some bumps.
Nice. That's probably the case with all these things right now. There might be some bugs, but I expect that they're going to get good and just be awesome. This one's really cool. I don't know. I got a little too excited too. Anything that gets Jason excited gets me excited.
Speaking of this, one thing I've complained about from day one is that the Unity search features are absolute pants. They're just really bad, and there's not even a basic concept of a regular expression you can run in the input box. Now, I don't know what these, they're talking about advanced reports and things. I don't know if their search stuff applies to hierarchy searches or project view searches. I don't even know what this represents yet, but I hope to hell it's can use the search features in Unity like someone should be able to when using any search feature in anything. I hope it's gotten to that stage where I can actually have more than one filter, an AND operation, an OR operation, the very basics of concept of a search filter. So here's hoping that some of that's in there.
Didn't you already have these?
No, you can type just the tags, the layers, but you can't do XORs or NORs or any. You can't do any. You can't say this tag but not this label or this whatever. Those options don't exist, and you can't use wildcards. So if you can't use wildcards and you can't use ORs and ANDs, the search basically becomes a very broad filter and not a search.
I am going to change your wall right now.
Hey, if there's stuff there, I'll use it. I'm excited. Go for it. This is great.
So this is the Unity Quick Search. And it has a bunch of operators for you.
Wait, this is the pop-up one though. This isn't the search box in the hierarchy.
This is the new one that they added.
Yeah,
this is now default to the editor.
No. That doesn't. Saying here the solution to your problem is this other thing that pops up as a different tool. That doesn't count.
So you don't understand. The new Unity version will have this one as the default search.
Okay, in that case, good. Yeah, because I knew it had these features, but in classic Unity fashion, sometimes they roll out things like search features and only apply it to 10% of the editor, and it doesn't work everything else. So if they're replacing the default search provider with this, then yes, that's very exciting. I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah, if that's the case, that would have been better explained just by saying that or having that as a note. It seems like the notes here are more like the technical part. Not very explanatory for us.
Now we just need one last extra bit to make this in any way really useful. Is now that you've got search features that work, for the love of God, let me bulk edit metadata for my files. If I've got a whole bunch of assets in my project, let me add multiple labels, multiple tags, let me sort through and change different assets and attributes so that the search features have value. As opposed to changing one label and having the entire asset database rebuild, changing another label, have the entire asset rebuild every time when I'm trying to add 70 labels to tidy up a project. So that's the next thing. We're nearly there.
All right. So anything with the new shader stuff that's come in 2021.2 that you guys were interested in?
So there were a few things that I wanted to bring up, but none of them are particularly gigantic, except while I don't think this shows specifically here, the universal rendering pipeline finally added deferred rendering, which is huge for many reasons. Does anybody want to talk about why before me, or?
No, I think anybody that wants to just explain the difference between deferred rendering and forward rendering and why somebody would care, and because it's probably been one of the things that's kept people on the old pipeline. I remember having discussions about this before. So yeah, if you can just dive into what the differences are and why would somebody care that deferred rendering is available?
Okay, so I guess I'll go. When you're drawing something on the screen, there are passes which say, well, I am going to draw the color of it now, and then I see there is a light, and I need to have some shadows where I am not lit, or draw darker, to say, when I'm not lit. So I'll make a lighting pass, and I'll just draw the color right here. And then I have another light, so I'll draw the colors right here. And there's shadowing from the areas that are not lit specific to every single light. And as you go through these things, you end up drawing the same object many, many times. This is what's called forward rendering, where for every single source, you draw the object again with specific settings. But
For every light source.
Yeah, for every light source. But this is not always ideal, especially if you know how everything should draw. There are ways around this where you can say, well, instead of doing all of this at once, let me just do it on all the objects at once for every light source. And this is what's called deferred rendering, where you don't draw any lighting information on any of the objects until the end of drawing all the objects, and then you do a single lighting pass on all of them. And this only works while they all use the same shading technique, because only one thing does the lighting for everything now. But it cuts down on massive costs, especially if you have a lot of objects that they all have to do all these tests for every single light source that might be affecting them. So some games you will see with like a bunch of lights, and some games without almost any lights. It might be stylistic choice, or it might be that they were going for forward rendering and the performance costs were crippling, and other games were going for deferred, and they can have as many lights as they want because it's all going through one pass. One thing they showed in a GDC presentation for Genshin Impact is that they used deferred lighting to have 1,000 light sources at the same time in one scene, and it just looks amazing.
Does anybody want to just really quickly talk about why you might pick forward rendering for something instead, though? Because, I mean, talk to all the benefits of why you would switch to deferred. Anybody want to just quickly tell some people listening like why that's not always the choice?
I can fill in if nobody else wants it.
Yeah, go for it.
And I'm letting little signs. Yeah, okay. So when I said that if you know how everything draws and you have a holistically same rendering technique for everything, like all the objects draw the same way, then you can use the deferred rendering. But if they all use different ways to light themselves, for example, something might want to be only lit by this kinds of stuff, and this one, when it's lit, it's actually a toon shader instead of a physically based looking one, etc., etc. Every single different technique is going to break the idea of deferred rendering. So you're going to have to want those to be still in forward pass. By the way, you can use both. Things that don't support deferred rendering will use just forward rendering with all the deferred ones. So there isn't exactly a huge detriment to using deferred, unless you hate everything having the same style or you're using some weird code in your lighting technique.
Anybody else want to hop in on that, or you guys ready to jump on past shaders and talk about terrain and UI stuff?
It's very confusing. I've never understood it. So Uri, thank you for that explanation. I still don't completely understand it, but it's a little bit better. It's been one of those things that I'm always like, which one do I choose? I guess deferred.
Deferred is almost always better.
Yeah, I'm going to get some hate, but they've added lens flares to URP finally, and I'm happy about that because I like lens flares. And I'm going to get loads of hate for that because loads of people hate lens flares. But I'm making a space shooter at the moment, and I really want to put some lens flares in there. And I've got URP running, so there we go. And I know
Even better,
and even better,
they actually. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say I always love when you watch some reviewer, someone playing some game, and they're like, "Oh, lens flares. That's not how eyes work. You can." This is pretty funny. So yeah, I don't care. I think it can be stylistic and looks good, but it is very funny when you see people get really annoyed talking about. But that's their eyes. This is supposed to be your face. It's a camera.
I've had people shout at me before about putting lens flares in it. I'm like, cinematography, go away. But yeah, it's just what it is.
I wanted to say that if you're happy about lens flares, they also added decals now, so Europe is finally getting new parity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I'm happy about those things.
That is nice. That was one that was only in HDRP for the longest time, right? The decal.
Yeah, that's right. And HDRP, I don't use it personally for the stuff because I do a lot of VR, but the clouds look really pretty. There you go.
Actually, one more thing that I want to bring up while we're talking about shaders, 2021.1 actually gave us point light shadows for URP, which is huge in its own respect for especially darker games where you're carrying a light source. So yeah, that's
horror games.
That's one of those
so much better.
Yeah, I was like, I refused to use URP for the longest time until this was added because I like having things on the character that light up the area. And when I saw that Unity doesn't even get this for URP for 3 years, but Unreal just added Lumen that runs on toasters and makes everything ray traced cone-shaped lights on anything you carry without even having to set the light source, I'm like, way to go, Unreal. Really showing them. Come on, Unity, catch up.
Yeah.
Very good point. So UI stuff, or actually terrain.
Oh wait, just one last thing before that. I know it's a small thing, but introduced keyword space separation. I'm assuming that means not every shader value needs to be thing underscore thing underscore thing in this obnoxious pattern that gets very confusing sometimes. So that's just a nice quality of life thing.
Get rid of underscores. What about this terrain details thing? Have you guys? This was something that I remember having to work on a long time ago, doing some work with the terrain rendering and getting it to get performant. It looks like they've made a change so that you can now have all of the details, just use whatever materials you want for the rendering. And I assume we're going to get much better performance out of that, but
genuine question, does anybody actually use the Unity terrain system, or does everybody use something like Gaia? Because honestly, I don't know a single person who, for an actual project where terrain is a primary feature, they use the Unity native terrain.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where they use it as it's the primary feature. I mean, I definitely have used it as like a background thing or as a primary part for terrain in game, but then it's been switched again. But yeah, I don't know.
It's been a long time.
I would assume there's got to be a good number of people that are using it, though.
Yeah,
Andrew, you're using it, right?
I haven't actually had to make terrain for a very, very long time. I made one recently with the default, but this is 2019.4, so nothing new. But I haven't even had to use Gaia forever. It's been a long time since I've had to make terrain, so I'm like, I don't know, maybe I will try it out.
Unity 5 is the last time I used it, and I was doing like a remake of Desert Strike, and we had some terrain, but it was very gentle sand dunes and stuff like that. And it was a not released game; it was just a prototype to show.
So a friend of mine, yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a friend of mine used as the Unity terrain in one of his projects, and I wanted to bring it up. So this is what you're seeing right now. He talks a lot about his inspirations, what tools he used, and he used a lot of them, as you can see on the list of the assets. And if anybody wants to read this, it might be worth your time to see all the techniques he went through and different settings he had to figure out to get nice rendering going on, and these inspirations. So Unity terrain can be used. Yeah, Unity terrain can definitely be used to great leverage if you coat it with enough assets to make it pretty.
Well, that's the main thing, right? Like the reason I kind of dismiss the default one is not so much that it's not a powerful tool. Like you can do a lot with it. It's just the fact that if you want a terrain, unless you're literally going to be placing every tree and rock in perfect detail yourself, traditionally you want a generator. You're going to want to press a button that says create some kind of vague surface terrain using various different, principles. And I find with Unity Terrain, you're doing a lot of manual sculpting. And there's a lot of things out there that you drop in something like Gaia or whatever, and you just press a few buttons, and they know you want a vague terrain with these feature sets using, this certain thing, and you get started much faster. So the truth is, if you like, it's not that it's a bad tool. It's just if I have a project that is heavily terrain based, I don't want to start by placing a gray rectangle and building up from there. I want to press go, have a terrain, and then sculpt out the things I don't want.
So I think that's generally the best workflow too. Yeah. It looks like here all they've really done is a performance improvement, right?
It's a new feature, but it's based around letting you see the prototype and then seeing the HD version when you're not in the mode where you need to see the prototype, as far as I understood it, for the terrain things at least.
So what
for
about
the UI
this
toolkit?
UI, yeah. How are you guys on this thing? UI toolkit.
I'm going to say really that I'm shutting it out.
You're shutting it out? Andrew loves it.
Yeah, I'm shutting it out. I have a lot of grudge against how everything about its development is going. So,
141
if anybody else wants to say nice things before,
I'm neutral. I think it looks cool. I haven't used it, and I have some questions. I make a lot of my own custom UI for editor extensions, and this is the runtime, or is this the? There's two, right? There's the editor.
It's the same one, but they made it available for the runtime too.
Okay, yeah. So I'm excited to use it because I hate making UI, as Jason Story knows. I hate making UI for games, and I'm terrible at it. So that makes it seems very exciting for me. But then on the editor side of it, I'm also hesitant because I do a lot of custom stuff, and now I'm like thinking, all right, how am I going to use this with custom stuff? And there's just a lot of questions. I mean, other stuff that we've talked about. I'm sitting here thinking, shoot, I'm gonna have to update all my packs to support this new thing and all this stuff. So it creates a lot of work for me too.
I tried to like it. I really did, and a good editor tool is considerably faster than writing it out in code. Like because you're literally designing something visual, so by design it should be visually designed. The truth is though, every time I've tried to use it, they've made it into like 8 steps. If you want to show a single button that says click me, now yes, you can physically create a button, create the view graph thing, add the button to it, register the thing, hook it up, and do all of that in code. Sure, but that's not what you're supposed to do, and that's not what they recommend. The correct way to make a button on a screen requires 3 separate files, loaded incorrectly a certain way, bound a style sheet to it, bound the graph, and then you get your button. And we haven't even put any logic to activate the button or what it does yet. Now, that's a good thing from a modularity and control perspective, but the fact that to get started requires so much legwork is kind of silly. Now, there is some, again, patchwork tools, like there's a button you can press that says create the 3 files I need for me, and then the editor is supposed to give you a way of editing all 3 at once, but it's just so tedious. Like, I should not be able to be considerably faster making custom editors using code than clicking buttons in an editor. Like, I can't, if I was racing myself using both tools, I would be literally 5 to 6 times faster producing the same outcome UI using just snippets of code, refactoring out bits that repeat, iterating through it, rather than having to go through this whole style sheet, make thing, event stuff. Now, the powerful thing about it is you can do a ton of stuff you can't do with the current UI system. There's so many features you can't do. You can style sheet things in crazy ways where you can do all sorts of like mouse over effects and animations and all this stuff. It's really, really powerful. It is just with this editor tool, unless you know what you're doing, you're not going to be able to do it with this tool. It's clunky. It's at best, it's a visualizer. I think that's the best thing I've used it for. Actually using it to edit is nearly impossible, but using it to just view as you're like working in kind of a live view as you start to plumb it out works very well. But the minute you touch anything, it starts to break and do weird stuff, and the layout doesn't work as expected, and it tries to generate which features you. It's a mess. I hope it gets more love. It would be a great feature to have in future. It's just not there yet.
What about you, David?
I haven't got into it yet. I've heard a lot of bad things, and I kind of steered clear of it until it had a couple of iterations on it. I was like, I'm not getting, because I'll get angry about it. And as a tools programmer, it boils my blood with all the stuff that Jason just said. Those things really irritate me. But there might be some room for people to make some assets and put some add-ons onto it out in the store that Unity then integrate, because it needs work. But yeah, I've been waiting for it to have a couple of iterations so that I can then dive in and really give it a good college try.
Yeah, because I think like what sums up to me why this is so needlessly confusing is if you use the older style of doing a UI and you create a button and you add it, you will get a button the same size as every other button traditionally in Unity, the same style, the same layout, and laid out correctly. If you create a new button using the new input system, you get an unstyled rectangle that looks nothing like any other element in any part of Unity, and you have to apply styles to match it back to where it was. Out of the box, it should create things that look like the things in Unity. It should start looking the right way and let you customize beyond that. But it's so open that they're just started with here's a blank canvas, and it goes back to the same problem I have with the terrain system. I don't like when they give you so much freedom that they start you with nothing. That doesn't help. They should start you with something and give you the freedom to modify it if you need to. But your out-of-the-box solution should be press button, get UI, looks exactly like the existing editor, and I can tweak the values to add new effects and features. But that's not what we've got.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for when I'm going to create larger tool windows. I'm excited to start getting into this, but for the quick inspector stuff that I add on, I have code snippets that I just start typing button, press tab, boom, there's a button, and I just fill in the details in there, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, I'm with you guys completely on this too. It feels a lot to me like it reminds me of when Silverlight and WPF came out, when Microsoft used to have really nice visual editors for making tools, and then they're like, well, in the new version, you just write markup and then you can kind of preview it and stuff, but you can't move them around because that'll make you make bad code. So we're not going to allow that anymore. We're going to make it so you have to remember all the markup and there's no designer at all, and you've got to figure it all out. And it was it was a terribly slow thing for adoption. Yeah. It made it really hard for people to pick it up. And I just struggled to see when UI Toolkit is like, when is that going to be the default where they're like, yeah, you create a new UI button and you hit add a button and it's there. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
It reminds me of back in the early days of website design, you could tell when someone used a visual editor to build their website, because every space would be line breaks. It would be BR, P tag, BR. It's like, yeah, they're using editor tools. They do not know how to build a website.
And it seems like this is kind of like trying to address that issue, but that's not really an issue because UIs and Unity are built a bit different. It does handle some things like it really well. Like I think for if you're doing a non-game app, it's probably great. If you're doing something with a really crazy advanced UI and you have UI programmers working on it full time, might be the right way to go. But for me, I've been also just hesitant and pushing it off.
Also, like I know. No, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the meeting between designers and the programmers, giving the designers more ability to add stuff and change things without having to hit the programmer every time. I'm all for that, and I'll see how this comes across in that sort of way.
I just don't see that actually happening, though. I don't see a workflow here where designers are actually making notable changes where you're saving more time than you're spending trying to get them.
Yeah, like what are you expecting your designers to all be masters of style sheets, right? They're all going to be there. Oh yeah, let me just do selector tags for this whole. Like, of course not. That's not going to happen.
So you're touching about the reason why this entire thing started. Yeah, you're touching about the reason why this entire thing started, where they decided, even though the entire engine runs on C#, this one thing is not going to use it because web designers and all those other external tool things should be able to come in and make all your stuff. And then they decided to do their entire solution for it that doesn't work in at all like what the web designers that they wanted to bring in would do. And they pitched how much performance it has, but then you read the feature set and it's missing 90% of what the Unity UI system does. Anything that you want to offer in this needs multiple files, and you have to type strings, things with tight strings, which it's a mess. Anything about this system, the more I read about it, the more I hated it. And I was following it for, I think it's 2 years now. And nothing about this registers as this is going to be good. And thankfully, lately they made a blog post about this where they said this is not going to replace Unity UI, even though for a full year we advertised that this is going to replace Unity UI. They've seen that there are many features that they won't be able to put parity with because this one changes how things render a lot. And I personally think that if you have a relatively small team and people are going to have to wear multiple hats, and they need to know how to use the Unity editor, they don't also need to start learning UXML style sheets and how to bind with this. They can just use Unity UI, and Unity UI is good and great and has a lot of expansions these days. So I am personally a Unity UI advocate, and I'm not going to say this is better until I actually see feature parity for most of the things that I use. Because when you look at a pretty game, and pretty might be subjective here, but let's say that there are some games with UI features that are more advanced than others. There are those with the UI blurring the back, and those with the glowing animating panels, and the fancy shaders, and the highlights, and the spectacles. None of this is here, and none of this will be here because they're trying to pitch the performance of drawing everything with one draw call by using only primitives and one shader. At least from the last time I checked this, which was about half a year ago.
Yeah, and I look at it as like, to be honest, I am almost the perfect audience for this. I am somebody who had a web, I started out using C# and all that stuff, and I moved into a web background in one of my previous jobs, and I spent like 6 years doing web work, mean stack development. I learned all of the CSS, SAS, JavaScript, using Node projects, all of the whole thing. So, and even before that, I was a WPF programmer, so I did all of the XAML stuff there too. And so when I moved to Unity and I did UI, going back to like hard coding your UI sequentially was a nightmare. It was horrible and clunky and messy and whatever. But like I spent like years, 5 or 6 years now, this is how I've been doing stuff in Unity. And now the idea of saying we're going to this other style, I should be loving it. This should be theoretically, all of my experience I had with that stuff means I should be the perfect candidate for somebody who's like, I'm jumping on board, I can create great UIs, and I love doing UIs. Anybody who sees all of my stuff, there's custom editors. But it's telling that like I don't want to switch, and I keep finding it awkward every time I try, despite the fact that I'm in a better position than most people, in that I do have XAML experience, style sheet experience, all of these other tools, and yet I still have trouble with it. And that, I think that tells more than anything else, right? Like if I'm having trouble switching to it, it's I'm not talking about some people are going to be good at getting the hang of it, but the average person is going to have a really hard time. And we haven't even talked about, as I said, feature parity and that kind of stuff too. I just find the whole thing, and yes, somebody mentioned you can just not use those tools. You can literally build it up again the same way. It's like, sure, but the way you're supposed to interact with it is doing .q and do query syntax into the visual tree and stuff. It's like, you can't tell me that makes more sense than just linearly writing out methods saying draw section, draw section, draw section. Like, if you're telling me that this is supposed to be a replacement, it has to provide better value. And if the value comes from all the styling stuff. If you're just going to try to replicate what you're doing with the existing tools, you can do that easier with the existing tools because they've been battle tested and there's tons of people writing stuff for it. There's millions of libraries on GitHub that show you how to get all the best features out of it. Is it a good system? No, but it's been battered into submission from all of the people using it, that until this new system can outright beat it, it's very hard to switch.
And I just want to bring up that even though I've been slamming against this package, it does have the merit of, okay, they're trying to make something better, but I will recommend it when it gets better. I'm not hating it for the sake of hating it. I wanted to love it. I wanted to have a better UI system because this came at the time where I was trying to make my own character creation with a lot of fancy visual features, a rotating triangle for colors, and etc., etc. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll try to use this. And I was just struck with how many lacking things. And if I want to use this, well, I can't. And if I want to use this, well, I can't too. And if I want to use that, well, I can't. And there was actually a page showing what features that this support that the Unity UI version does not support. And it was one-sidedly skewed entirely in Unity UI's benefit. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm checking out here and I'm going back to Unity UI. And it was a huge waste of time. So once it gets better and I see some points that I care about on toolkit's end, maybe I'll consider the swap.
That makes me feel better about my concerns, in a way. At the same time, I want it to work really well. But
yeah, I think we all want it to work, but
yeah,
just nobody really prefers the way that it works and the complication. I felt the same way. It's way too complicated for what you need to do, and it's a whole separate thing that you have to learn. It's a whole another language and set of sheets. It's unnecessary, I guess.
Like I would say
part of it, like we're not reacting to mobile devices changing constantly like a web page and thing. 99% of games, it's overkill. Go ahead, Jason.
No, I was going to say that the promise of a flex grid based UI is beautiful. I like for all the complaints. I want to go back to a world where I don't have to sit and do the math to calculate screen percentages per row based on rect transforms so I can fit things in the right positions on the screen. That is stupid. I should be able to say, here's my elements, here's my layout. And yes, you can do layout groups, various stuff. Like I want that to be easier because again, the reason you model it off web design is because web has to deal with all of these media query style, multi-sized platform stuff. There's learnings there that are valuable. And it would be nice to have stuff be more responsive and whatever, and not just have to, as everybody I assume does, immediately click scale with screen size, and in my case, switch to 0.5 and set it to 4K, and then never think about the canvas size again and just hope it looks good all of the time. It would be nice to be more responsive with your designs, but again, the trade-offs are just not there yet. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to see it, there's a page on the Unity manual that shows you what's supported on where. And literally the only benefit you get out of using the UI toolkit right now is that you can make Unity editor tools with this. But anything else, like rich text tags and SDF text and all of that, is just planned with no foreseeable future. Now, I think some of these actually got added in 2021. We are looking at the 2020.3, but a lot of this is still not going to be skewed in Toolkit's favor, and this really irks me.
Yeah. Maybe one day. I just wish that some of the things that we wanted in the old UI had just come instead. If some of the things that just like make it a little bit easier to work in the old UI probably would have been a little bit more helpful. Although, who knows? Maybe one day this will replace it. Maybe one day it'll go like Unet and it'll just disappear. I don't know. This is when people ask about those semi-experimental things. Like this is one of those that's probably marked as like a full feature that's not experimental, that I still kind of get concerned about it changing out from under me, or not supporting new things in the UI when the old ones does. We'll see though. So there were a couple more things, and we've got a little bit of time left. And there was a big one here that I wanted to hit, which was the new version control stuff. So they've it's not so much that it's new here, but it was new in I think 2020.1 or 2021.1 is I think when they added the first integration directly into the engine. But they've switched over to Plastic SCM instead of Collaborate. And I think that they're still supporting Collaborate in there, but they're kind of switching to Plastic as the new replacement for Collaborate. And for anybody that hasn't used it, it's kind of like Perforce. So I guess if you haven't used Perforce, it's another source control system like Git, Collaborate, SVN, Perforce. There are a whole bunch of them, but Plastic is one that was built for games. I think the first time I saw it was maybe 7 years ago or so. and they were just kind of trying to work around the problems for games specifically, like large art files, large model files, being able to have artists modify and edit those without having the duplicates that you get in Git, and dealing with some of the other problems that things like Perforce had. I haven't played with Plastic a lot. I, like I said, played with it a few years ago, and then this morning, while we were talking about it in the architecture call Q&A, I dove in and just kind of experimenting with it a little bit more. But I plan on doing a full video on it, and I was curious if you guys have used Plastic at all. Have you played with it, or collaborate, or where are you guys with source control just in general?
I used to collaborate with the artists I work with, and it's worked great. I mean, we only are passing individual files around, so it's nothing fancy, but it's much better than, using Unity packages or raw files. Plastic is, I guess, I don't know when Collaborate's going to go away completely, but we need to switch to Plastic. I just have been dragging my feet on it, but that is the next thing to try out.
So I've had conflicting stuff. I've heard some people say they click a button, it instantly converts, and it's amazing. And then we were on the Wednesday night meeting, Jason, and the Chris Lucian was having an absolute nightmare how his entire project broke during the process of trying to do the conversion. So I don't know. I haven't tried it yet myself. I still live over in Git land. I move everything over to Git, and I still use Unity Teams for the CI tools. I just do the CI tools through Git rather than through Collab. But who knows? I'm willing to give it a try. Like, the fact that you can have branches now inside of Unity is a sweet feature. Given the multiple different people I work with, it would be nice. So I'm positive. I'm optimistic, but I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes.
As far as I go, we are still using, just like Jason, GitHub, and then using the cloud features and deployment features through the Unity Cloud Services going to our GitHub repository. I have not used Plastic in any capacity that warrants a proper review. I did see a lot of good things about it, specifically against the fact that you can just use it compared to having to use Git LFS if you have any big files or a lot of bigger files with a 3D project, for example.
Myself, I used to be a big Perforce user, and now I'm Git, basically, same as Jason, Yuri.
Okay. I think Git's kind of the standard. Most time when I send out polls, more than 50% of people are using Git. So it's not a surprise. And somebody had mentioned that Plastic was expensive. So I just kind of wanted to go pull it up. And while the free version is definitely not expensive, and even the cloud one doesn't seem too bad, I'd say the enterprise one, I could see the issue. So part of the problem is if you look at the storage here, so if you're at 5 gigs, on $7 a month, depending on your team and your projects, 5 gigs might be, half of a project or a tiny little portion of a project. If you're using Git, I don't know about you guys, but all of the Git repos I have are unlimited size, and they don't seem to charge for anything. So I could see it being an issue there, but most people probably fit in the free version. I would bet that 95% of people paying attention to this fit fine in the free version.
So an important mention is it's 7 months a month per user, and that might scale terribly depending on the team size.
Right.
Especially,
I feel like once you start to
project.
get past 3 or maybe 5 or 7 people, that starts to become less of an issue, assuming that it's an actual professional team and not just a team of people doing hobby stuff. I can see that.
Well, one thing that's always just been a bit of a problem is, depending on the situation, seat licenses can be annoying if you're working on a project where you might have contractors and things drop by, or people working on certain aspects of the project. It starts to get very annoying having to deal with, adding additional seats just for different things. Yeah.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. If it's some project that you're going to have to share, I think Git is almost always the easier option there. Even Collaborate, it's kind of a pain to go into the UI, go find their Unity account and add them and stuff. So it seems like yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to check it out. I'm curious how this is going to compete with their service too. Their because they have Collaborate as a service, and that has a monthly fee. If they're switching to Collaborate, does that change out the cloud thing?
I think haven't they already said that this is going to replace it eventually, like Unity Teams?
Yeah,
That's
they
the
I think
impression I got. Yeah.
they have. I'm just kind of curious. Like, does that
Hmm.
mean that the pricing thing here isn't so much accurate for the Unity one, and it's going to merge into some other thing? Because I think right now I pay like $5 or $7 a month for Collaborate with the unlimited storage.
Yeah. I don't think it's. I don't know if it's a limited store. I have to pay. I
I've
just
never hit a
updated
limit, I
mine,
should
but
say. I don't
I
put that
see.
much stuff there.
So there's a slightly different pricing page on the Unity.com plastic page. I think it's the same pricing, but it goes down to the cloud storage being 5 gigs free, 15 or $5 per team for up to 15 gigs, and then $15 per team per month for up to 100 gigs. Then beyond that, it's like, every X gigs is some cost. That's the thing that gets me though, that always worries me. Even not just as a publisher of assets, but also as a user of assets, there's a lot of stuff you bring in, like nature manufactures Meadow and their forest, and suddenly you're at right there like 15 gigabytes, and suddenly I'm paying a monthly fee just to use assets from the asset store and not have to worry about which one of these music files do I really want in here, and having to manage the project size is kind of frustrating, knowing that if I don't do this, it's going to cost me an extra X per month or something. That's the thing that
Oh,
always gets me.
yeah. I wonder why this goes up, because the amount of storage actually used, like why it goes up. Oh, it's per team. Never mind. It isn't per person.
Yeah.
I read that wrong. Okay. So you actually can get quite a bit more storage though for relatively low cost, it looks like. Right. You're getting
And one other note,
that's per
William mentions that there's integration in the editor, which is a nice feature. Yes, I like that. It's quite nice to see the actual the diffs and merges on stuff there. But the truth is, you can get that if you want. Like, there are Git tools out there. I forgot where I found one. There are multiple people have made various plugins that will show you icon changes on changed assets for a Git repo in Unity. Now, I don't bother using them because I don't really need them. But my point is, if that's really a make or break it feature for you, you can get visual feedback in Unity for your Git projects. I just think most people who use Git are probably either using command line or using source tree or something. They're probably not doing it in editor.
Yeah, we used to, when we had Perforce at Sony, we used to build all the tools into Maya, etc., just for the artists and the designers, because they hated using the asset management programs. So we just used to have it so that they could do everything in whatever, whether they're in Maya or anything. So
yeah, I think that's
it ends up being an amazing time sink, right? The amount of times you have people where you've got a project full of people and the artists have trouble with something like Git, and so they have to go contact one of the developers to go show them how to do the various stuff. And so now you're basically on call as the Git support alongside your other jobs, and it can be a little bit hard work.
Yeah, so we had a Maya tool in the API that literally they would make a change and they could actually do the submission. And that was using Perforce at the time. But yeah, they would make a submission in Maya and it would all go through Perforce and go up. And the same for the art managers. They would get a ping and they'd have stuff that was shelved in Perforce, and then they could pull it down from the shelf and then look at it in Maya without actually having to touch the Perforce tool. Because the Perforce UI back in, like, we're talking 2005 or something, was freaking horrible anyway. And the new
red
Git
one
desktops
or the yellow?
Both of them. The artists wouldn't like red or yellow. Yeah, until why they had red and yellow was always a mystery to all of us.
To be fair, it's not amazing now. It's better. It's just still not a particularly good experience.
Git desktop that comes with Git has been quite nice for artists and designers, where they don't care about too much of the other stuff and they could just do the basics in there. That's been quite good from Git, and I've been very impressed with them from that.
Have you heard of a Tortoise SVN?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one I used to use a long time ago because there's a really great plugin for literally into your operating system. So you could just right click and do context menu items, which made it so intuitive for people who didn't know about all the other stuff. They would just say the folder has an icon that changes color. Click the folder and pull down or pull changes, and forget about tools and external stuff. That was a really nice integration at the time.
Yeah, a lot of our teams at Sony had Tortoise. But we basically, as a studio, moved over to Perforce in the end because we had all the integrated tools built with the AAA games, so we moved everybody over. But yeah, Tortoise was really good. There was another one we used to use. I can't remember what it was, but it had a similar sort of architecture.
Yeah, this one seems...
One thing I do want to bring up compared to the old tools is that when you just use Unity Collaborate and you wanted to resolve a merge conflict, there was actually no installed merge tool out of the box. So
yes, yeah,
as
there's no
you-
merge tool. That was really annoying. You'd have to go and get like git merge or something external just to, or
Yeah.
so annoying.
It's terrible because I was explaining to a friend, a beginner in Unity, how to use Collaborate to work on a school project with two other friends, a university project, and they had no knowledge of Unity Collaborate, and was like, it takes 5 minutes to set up, then you can all share the project, show versioning, etc., etc. And I took it for granted because I used source tree, that I'll just be able to see merges and share. Stage these hunks, discard the other hunks, etc., etc. And as I got to showing him how to resolve a merge conflict, I got stuck because I was like, wait, what? There's no merge tool for this? What do I do in here? There's only
Yes.
I use theirs, use mine, and cry about it option.
So just a tip for anybody who's stuck in that problem: if you still don't have a merge tool on your machine, there's something called diff merge, which is just a free merge tool that you can set up as your automatic. It's not a great merge tool, but it's a free merge tool that will work for exactly that scenario.
It's
That's
not
why
bad.
I've used that and beyond.
To be fair, it's not terrible. It's
Yeah.
just there. It's just if you pay for something fancier, there tends to be more involved automatic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of frustrating because you're specifically working with Unity Studio. You'd expect something that deals with all the meta file conflicts for you. It's just, why isn't it there?
Hey, at least we're long past the phases where everything was binary files and all the meta files got changed every commit. So improvements I'll take when I'll take them.
I'd forgotten about that when all the prefabs were serialized as binary by default, and there was no way to set them as the other. Yeah.
Yep.
Been a long time, right? So the
That was so
plastic
painful.
stuff, I don't know. I'm excited about it, but if people want to see a video about it, hit thumbs up and just drop a comment. If enough people care, then I'll just do a video on it. I think I'm going to do one anyway, but that's just to entice people to hit the buttons for me.
I will say, speaking of Git tools in general, I really want to use Git Kraken. I like the UI; it's very pretty. It's got a nice chart system, but they've done the same thing so many companies do, which is just poison the well for me. Is they keep trying to push it into some sort of project management tool. They've added a whole load of features that I don't care about. They're charging a subscription model fee, and it's like, man, I'll give you up to like $200 to just buy it once and leave me alone. I don't want your team service multi-chat nonsense. You have a nice tool and I will buy it. But if you're not going to let me buy it, I'm not paying a subscription for the privilege of looking at my own files on my machine through your tool on a subscription service. That's insane to me.
I just want to say, in Terraria, we've been using source tree for most of our version control time, but as we moved to trying new things, we decided to take a week to just explore all our options on source control, and we ended up deciding to use Git Kraken. I can say that we're very happy with it. We did have 3 different scenarios where the system itself just collapsed for the Git Kraken tickets thing, and that was awkward. But other than that, we love how we can see the changes, the conflicts, and they did justice to the concept of version control, is all I'll say.
But that's the thing, is because I really don't like source tree. I use source tree when I have to because it's the best of those tools. I'll use command line most of the time, but if something evolves past that, like nobody's looking at the tree structure using the command line. Like if you are, you're insane. Like it's a silly idea to print out the tree structure. If you're going to be doing any kind of complex rebasing or whatever, you want to look at a proper tree in a visual tool and do it the right way. And annoyingly, source tree is the best option. But I much prefer the visual style and the quality and polish of Git Kraken. I just refuse to pay a subscription fee for something like that when like there's so many tools out there that I'll happily pay a price for, but I'm not going to subscribe to.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
So for the WebGL improvements or additions, was there anything that you guys cared about, or does nobody here care about WebGL? I saw that they added support for compressed audio, which probably fixed some of the issues that I had with that last Lego Jam. But I'm curious if there was anything else.
Until they add WebGL works properly, I'm out. I'm just not using it for anything.
Yeah.
I'll say it another way. I love using WebGL. We've been using it to make automated builds of our prototype projects and sending them straight to our Slack channel. So anytime somebody makes a change, 40 minutes in, someone can just try it out on WebGL, Windows, etc. Love that. I will say ML API does not work on WebGL right now, and it's killing me because we wanted to have a multiplayer project that we can just try things out, a prototype, just making things fun. And as soon as we saw ML API does not work with WebGL, we said, okay, let's not use ML API at all and just go back to anything that does work, like Photon, which it's crazy to me that one of the official Unity solutions does not work one of the official Unity platforms. Like, why?
I only use WebGL when I'm doing game jams because you get more community votes for it, and they
100%.
tend to be fairly small projects. Apart from the VR game jams, obviously, but yeah, that's the only time I use it. I don't use it for any of the big projects.
Yeah, well, I mean, it comes with the territory of having people browse your things and not wanting to waste time installing files. So it's always nice, especially when you're working on prototyping. If you just want everybody to hop in and try out your prototype, it's a mess to just make them download a file, extract it, try it out, delete the old one, etc., etc.
I actually
I have a hot
made
take
a very
on that, by the way. Just with the Unity, I have a hot take with the WebGL stuff, and so I'm curious of people's opinion on this. So, if you remember, the earlier version of the Unity for Web was a plugin. Like you literally had to install the Unity plugin thing, and then if you didn't have it on your machine, basically it's like Flash. You don't have Flash installed, go install Flash. And nowadays they're using all the fancy HTML5 rendering features, whatever. I think we should go back to a plugin. I honestly wish, because given that, as you said, a lot of people use it for game jam style approaches, I would be super happy if there was an option for people who use Unity or play Unity games to install a localized runtime with all the crap that I don't need to bundle with my project, and then create a WebGL project that effectively could run it. And it would be load faster, you'd have a lot more native support, and it would be easier to work with, because the whole idea of this freeform web-based works on anything is great, but it doesn't work properly. And so I'm more than happy to bridge my gap and make it more shareable in that direction. But I need the system to meet me halfway. So I wish they would bring back a runtime environment that you could install, put on your machine, and it would launch locally once you've installed the game. That's what I want to have.
Yeah, the workaround I had is I use Inno setup, and that builds installers. And I had a thing where you would press build in Unity, and it would then run the Inno setup and produce an installer, and then that would go out to the team, and then they would install it. So they wouldn't have to go and remove the old one and play with it. They could just quickly do those. And you can run Inno setup like straight from batch off the Unity. That's the way I used to get around it. But yeah, I'm with you. If WebGL was just there, I would use that instead.
Yeah.
It's one of those times to use deep linking to just make a link that makes your game install and play.
There you go.
Or get meta with it. Create a Unity application that's an installer for your applications that when you open it, shows a list of your projects that has a button to auto-download it and auto-launch them inside of it.
If you do that, you can just straight up make live game deployments with it.
I had a friend who streams, and he uses Construct a lot, and he got so annoyed with people having to go at him about not using Unity that I created him a Unity game that when you opened it, it launched Construct. And then he actually went in and built his stuff in Construct. Drove his channel nuts.
Just wanting to make a small note here, but the lead artist in Real Logic is actually using Construct a lot too. It seems like a really popular tool for these kinds of purposes.
My friend, his actual name is Vimlock, and he has a channel, and he builds loads of game jam stuff with Construct.
The Game Jam King, actually. He's like, with some of those Game Jam, he's the first name that pops into my head.
Oh, Vimlock. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. He comes around here. We're supposed to do some collaboration stuff. Jason's been doing some stuff with him as well.
Yeah, I almost wore his hoodie this morning. I was grabbing hoodies, and it was between this one and the Vimlark one, and I went with this one. I don't remember why. I think
I should wear his hoodie, actually.
Glow. What's that?
I should put his hoodie on, actually, for one of the streams. But yeah.
Yeah,
And he's the guy with monkeys. And I'm actually building a game with him called Monkeys with Guns, which is actually in Unity, because he'd done it in Construct, and I was like, no, I'm going to build it in Unity. But yeah, he's a good guy. Go and check out his channel, people. After this, obviously.
So let's jump back into one more thing. Somebody had mentioned scripting. What section am I in here? I'm trying to scroll through the improvements. There we go. Let's see. C#. I'm gonna pop up and screen share again because there was another thing that I think everybody is probably interested in if I can find it. There we go. Updated C# language to 9.0.
Mm.
Did you guys all catch this part in here?
Yep.
Pattern matching's cool. I'm looking forward to using that, I guess. Honestly, a lot of the newer features from C# 8 onwards, I'm not a fan of. I don't hate them. I'm just not super enthusiastic. I find that a lot of them are like all the tuple stuff and whatever. I think it just makes code look messier, personally. But hey, I mean, it's cool, I guess. We'll see.
Yeah, I felt like a lot of them are solving problems that aren't necessarily common in the Unity context, that are more common in web development and enterprise stuff. I know a lot of enterprise developers who are pretty excited about some of those features that I just like struggle to see where they would make a big improvement for me in my current workflow. But there's some stuff like pattern matching that I think is really cool. What about the rest of you guys?
I'll only say, go ahead.
I was just saying that I'm the same as you. I read through it and I was like, some of this just makes the code look a lot different, and don't need that in my life. So
it's funny because I remember getting excited about this in the past, the version upgrades when they added new C# versions, because there were new features that I actually cared about. But I guess
that's when we were stuck in 2 and we were able to move to 4, and then we're like, oh, that's good.
We were stuck on 3.5 for the longest time, and I couldn't use. You couldn't use link. You couldn't use like tasks. My God, it's so much. Like I said for so long. Once it moves to 4, I don't care if it ever improves again. Just give me the basic quality of life features that came in 4, for the love of God. And they finally did, and I was like, okay, I'm happy now. I don't care anymore. I can use tasks for my async stuff. I can use link for all of my nice, for setting things up at the start. I can use my string interpolation functions now, so I can write cleaner string values. Done. Anything else is a nice novelty I don't need. I have all the tools that were actively missing from my normal development.
Yet on my level, we're still using Visual Studio 2010 for Terraria.
Which you can't get anymore, as you've reminded me before.
Yeah, the installer for it does not work anymore at all. It relied on Games for Windows Live, and it's downloading it from the internet, and the server that serves it is dead, so the installer will always fail now. You have to literally open up the installer, take out the components, and install them individually, and hope that you're doing it right, because there's no documentation of it online at all. So we're lucky we kept the backup, is all I'll say.
Yeah, that's crazy. So what do you think about these new features, Jari?
So I wanted to say that as a concept, the every version of C# is making the authoring your code closer to writing English, and I've actually been a really big fan of this because it's making life easier for anyone I'm trying to teach. For example, the is not, instead of adding not on parenthesis, something is something, and giving things identities as you cast them, etc., etc. All those small changes really make lifestyles working with C# and in tandem Unity better for me. I don't think I've actually had a specific version that I'm like a big fan of in particular. It's just, oh yay, more improvements. Oh yay, more improvements. The syntactic sugar, whichever version added it, is the best one ever. I think nothing else can top that. But
so are there any features in here you were really excited about? Or in just the new one, like the pattern matching? I know you'd listed a couple in here, but were those just the ones at the top, or ones that you actually cared about?
I didn't care for anything in these in particular, but when the time comes, I'm going to say, oh yeah, you can actually do this instead, and that's the time I'm going to be happy with it.
Cool. Yeah, if anybody
I
watching
admit-
has thoughts, drop them in the chat and comments too. I'm kind of curious what features people care about.
I
What do you
admit
see?
local functions are the one that I don't like. They something annoying I don't like about scopes within scopes within scopes that starts to make my eye twitch. It's like if you're going to have multiple local functions, then you might as well just have another class. But I think that's just a gut reaction. I think there is a world future me loves local functions. I just haven't gotten to that point yet. As for everything else, though, I'm just looking at like new feature of partial methods. You shouldn't be making partial methods. You should be making partial classes unless you're using code generators. There's no reason to do that. Um, then the lambda discards are cool. That's just like anything that makes the code a bit cleaner. But a lot of this stuff is either like kind of it does make the code easier, but there's a point where you start adding more code symbols into what's meant to make it cleaner. Like a lot of the pattern matching stuff is good, but then you've got that other the other aspects, like for example, the target type conditional expressions, that just makes the lines longer and more convoluted, where you're doing like inline partial case statements and it reads worse. Like it legitimately, I look at it and go, that's now more confusing to me at least. So I don't know, like it's powerful and there's some of this stuff is really cool for like other tools I've worked on in the past. I would love to use them, but in terms of code clarity, a lot of this stuff just feels like they have to add new features somehow. So let's just add random stuff, I guess.
Yeah,
I do
I
want
think
to
a
say
lot
that
for web developers.
I do want to say that when they'll bring up C# 10, that's when we're going to see the biggest change for Unity if they decide to support it properly. Because one of the things that C# 10 does for you is that it lets you eliminate the initial scope in normal programs. And if we can just have mono behaviors where we don't have to make sure the class name matches the file name, that might actually be...
Yes.
Yeah. That might actually save us a lot of both in terms of opening and closing contexts and saving on issues that happen as a result of mismatched names. Because one of the worst things I can see is that when people with Outrider try to change a class name and the file, the mono behavior just stops being referenced and everything breaks because Unity expects them to be the same name and there's no class of this name mentioned in this file.
Yeah, and like I said, if that happens to a scriptable object, it will effectively no longer be able to serialize that object. And I've never found a way to get that back. I don't know if somebody knows it, but if you do that to a scriptable object, your data is there, but you can't access it. It might as well be gone, and you're back to square one rebuilding your scriptable objects.
The
I
only
have a
way I know
solution.
about that, the only way I know about that is the formally serialized tag, and it should work for everything. But
For fields, yes, but what I'm saying is if you move the class, right, as you said, if
whole
you move the
class.
class out, and it's there's nothing to reserialize to match that.
I'm pretty sure it goes by the GUID, so it should still work. I mean, I haven't tried, so.
So there was another one here that kind of caught my eye. That they multi-threaded asset garbage collection and increased speed up to 2.5 times. Did you guys catch that one?
I caught it, but it's nothing world changing. When you think about it, garbage collection should never probably happen unless you design the spot for it to happen where the user won't notice. And if it does happen and makes a hitch, realistically, what this says, even if it's 2.5 times faster, we were just saying it takes 40% of the time it took earlier, but you're still going to see the hitch if you saw the hitch. So
Right.
we're not really getting anything out of this. Aside, I guess, if you're programming for garbage collection every 1 second.
Right. It depends how much you're pushing the edge there too. How much that hitch, whether or not that hitch is noticeable or it's getting to the point where it's going to be a noticeable one. But it does seem like a nice, just all around improvement for no cost, right? Because there's no extra work required there. If your game is doing some allocation or some collection, it should be quicker. And I assume that even though, to be honest, like I always tell people, your game shouldn't be allocating at all while you're playing. I always expect that they're still doing some, like that most people are still having some allocations happening somewhere, even when they're trying not to, and that probably at least half the people aren't thinking about it at all. I think like giving it zero thought on garbage allocations. Oh, not that that's a good thing, but
I give zero thought right now.
yeah.
And And if you have problems with garbage allocation, go watch Jason's video on object pooling.
Oh yeah, that video has been actually really popular. I was surprised. I think it's because it's a new Unity feature that a lot of people just didn't know about. Those generic
I didn't know
object
about
pools.
it until I saw your video.
I stumbled on it. I saw something about it, and I was like, "Wait a minute, what?" I was like, "When the hell did that get added?" And then I started diving into it. So
we mentioned this in one of the videos where we did a code review. But yeah, I mean it's great.
yeah, I just totally forgot. So any other really cool improvements or interesting things on here? This list is huge, and we kind of went through all the new features, but the list of improvements and fixes is pages and pages and pages. So I just wanted to see if there's anything that you guys want to call out specifically, or that anybody in chat wants to call out and talk about for the last few minutes.
Some miscellaneous things that we glossed over, but one of the nicer features for URP is that they added the ability to rename light layers. Now, unless you have a lot of lights and you're trying to make like a really cinematic thing, usually this won't matter too much to you, but it's a nice quality of life. We mentioned this subtly, but URP also added decal shader graphs now, and motion vectors. So we'll probably see a lot of nicer assets for these soon.
Yeah, decals would be really nice.
Yeah, and for 2021.1 that we completely didn't even get to yet, there were some big changes to the editor, specifically by making Bolt and the search, the quick search feature, become default installed packages, which will be a big change for your project if you're suddenly seeing icons you never recognized as soon as you hit play, because Bolt makes a game object and sets it to not destroy every single time you press play. And it's
And
installed
that's
by
the
default.
visual scripting system for everybody who's not familiar with it, right?
Yeah. Visual scripting, previously named Bolt.
Yeah.
I mean, until I started playing with the package manifest file, I was amazed at what was default installed. I was like, oh, I did not realize there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that is like I've never even used once, and it's kind of part of the default package set.
And for the new search, what's the hotkey for that again? You just tell everybody. They probably haven't seen it.
I do not remember. One thing that happens is that if you press the search in the project view, it should open a new window for searching assets in the latest Unity version.
Oh, did not know that. Okay, the big button up there. I've got it. It's not a screen shared. I've lost what the hotkey was for this too. I thought it was just double shift, but that's a rider. I'm getting them mixed up. I see the big search button here though. I'm gonna screen share this real quick and just let everybody see it. What about other features? Anything else you guys thought was really cool? Here's that new search, by the way. You hit the search box, bam, get the big old box. And this is the one that had all the features you were talking about earlier, right, Jason? They've now moved into the other search boxes to be able to search for something and something else. If I had anything in my project, I'd search for it, but it's an empty project.
Because that's one of those things I do for almost every one of my projects. I just think it's such a small quality of life thing, is that if you have anything in your own code, which is like a list of something, implement your own string search. It can be something as simple as take in a keyword and do a contains against lists of names or something, but it's amazing how much value add you get from just doing some basic search features.
One other thing that's potentially huge, but I haven't had a chance to mess with it myself yet, is that they moved some feature. They added an HDRP to the core rendering pipeline package, which is 2D texture atlasing utilities for real time. So if you're loading textures at runtime, say from addressables, and you want to not pay the performance cost of using multiple textures, and you want them to be instanced rendering together, etc., you can actually use real-time atlasing to make one atlas texture, assign it to everything that you need to, and then use that instead. So might be huge, but will require manual work to implement.
Yeah, that's a cool one. Definitely not automatic, though.
Yeah. I mean,
everything
that
else?
says classes usually is not out of the box for you.
Well, to answer Felipe's question, which shortcut has been the most valuable to you? Well, the most valuable one is just Control P because nobody ever uses it to just press play. It's so much easier than trying to like click the little button. It's so much easier. I don't understand. And if it's not that one, it's all the F stuff. F, Shift F, all of the focus and connect. Or what's the other one? It's Control Shift C or Control the one that moves the current object to match the rotation of the scene view. That one I use all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it was another F1.
It's funny because I know them by instinct to use. I just don't remember the exact keys. You know, you just sort of do them by muscle memory at this stage.
Yeah, for me it would be Control Alt P because more than just trying to enter play, I'm trying to pause on exact frames where something happens to make sure it looks just right. And being able to pause with just on that frame without having to actually add a breakpoint in the code, way easier for me. Because if I had to go and change a class every time. Yeah, just
the
pause.
other one too. Oh god, it's killing me. Yeah. The other one too is just because it's one that surprises me as well. Is you see a lot of people who click the 3 buttons in the top left corner, like QWE jumps between your rotation, your pointer, and the scale. And like if you're doing anything with consistent movement, you want to be dragging around. And it's like it really surprised. I've seen people who've been using Unity for years, and they still click and change the icon every time they want to switch between a scale or a move. Like you have to. That one is a must. QWE. Just have your hand on those keys when you're working with any kind of scene stuff. And then the same applies with Pro Builder. There's keys for each of the modes. I think it's H, J, and K. I think that does the switches between the different modes when you're leveling out. You know,
if you're doing 2D block stuff, it's the snap tool. So using snap, and then you can snap vertex to vertex.
V, so good. That is one. That one actually is one of. That's probably the one. Actually, come to think of it, that might be the one that saved me the most time since I learned it. Because the amount of times you try to you're off in space somewhere, you drag something over, you rotate the camera, you drag it down, you realize you're 5,000 miles away, you rotate the camera again, you're like, oh, drag once, done.
And actually, it's not just. I use it in Monkeys with Guns for the blocks, but I also use it when I'm building space stations because you have loads of components with corridors and all the rest, and you just want to snap them all up. So yeah, Control V for me is one that since I learned, it's an absolute time saver.
Lots of good hotkeys. I was gonna say I use T as well. You said QWE. I use T all the time when I'm adjusting the scale of things. When I want to just drag them out one direction. It's really weird. I feel like I probably shouldn't be using the Rect Transform tool, but I do on 3D stuff just consistently.
I use that all the time for scaling. It's easier, I think.
Yeah, because you can scale it and just drag it in one direction instead of making it grow and then having to recenter it.
Especially when I'm doing colliders for like buildings and stuff, because it's just cubes and you're trying to match up, and for that exact reason, you can just bring one wall here, one wall there, and just line it up perfectly.
Okay. And also your own ones that you add to your menu item.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say that. I thought it'd be too cheeky to say which one's mine. The ones for the tools that I make for myself.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's what
because I use because I think it's Control B, and it'll automatically scan the whole project, find any null fields, and will automatically try a get component on itself to figure out any objects that might be missing, and lets me know what's been automatically populated. That one's quite handy. You should press that one.
Control B, scan through all your objects, look for missing serialized fields, and then try to do a get component call.
Yep.
Yeah, that's something.
What do you call that one? Cleanup or something, or fix up?
I think I can't remember. I think I called it just fix tools in general. I have a whole load of. I also the whole validating things as null as required fields and handling those separately. That's still a video that's half made, by the way. I have the script written. I've got partial parts of that video recorded. I just have to put that one out at some stage.
So one thing I want to bring up, it's not a Unity hotkey, but specifically a Windows 10 hotkey. You can enable an option to enable, I don't remember how it's called precisely, but there is an accessibility feature that lets you set your windows to black and white. And the grayscale actually lets you see contrast more easily. So when I'm trying to explain to people why their screenshots suck, I can just toggle it on, show them how it looks in black and white.
I need to know what this is. This is great. What's this, Shirk? I don't know this one.
You have to enable it in the options, but it's Control Windows C. And I'm not sure if you'll actually see it, but I should be having a black and white background right now because my Windows is putting out
I'm
Like
writing
light.
that one down. I'm gonna have to look into that. I keep having to bring up the WCAG contrast checker and taking a screenshot, dragging it in, sending Stephen a link to it. So that seems like a much nicer way to do it.
So it's
Yeah.
color
So
filters is the feature name. I just turned it on.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so that one is amazing, and everyone should know that it exists because it helps so much, both in game design and application, making sure that anything is readable, etc., etc. The amount of value I got out of this hotkey is amazing. Also, yeah, go ahead.
No, you're going to continue. I'm going to switch. So
Okay.
go ahead.
So I want to say that. Wait, I'm hearing myself.
As I went into black and white blue screen there,
Wow.
everyone can see.
Infinite.
Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to say that prior to that, I would have said that JSON's hotkeys are the best hotkeys because I did not actually ever implement a shortcut for my own features until Jason was like, hey, you made a great thing here that you should probably add a shortcut to. I made a frame rate limiter for my game so that I can test anything is running at low FPS. And he was like, yeah, now give it a shortcut so you can actually try it without enabling a component in the editor every time. So that was like, oh, wait, yeah, I can do that. Thank you. That took 2 years since they added a feature.
To be fair, I was very late to that game too. I had so many tools that I had my own custom tool menus, and it never occurred to me to just bind it to my own shortcuts.
Yeah, it's very powerful. If we're going to go outside of Unity, Windows Power Tools is something that I've been
Are
using.
they still?
Recently.
I used to use them a lot, but are they still around? Okay, goddamn, okay.
And it's still amazing because I use a widescreen monitor. Then I have 2 monitors to the side and 1 monitor down. I used it to basically break up the screens into regions, and then you can you're
Windows 11 automatically
errors.
has that though. Windows 11 has that out of the box.
Well, yeah, I'm on Windows 10 still, but yeah, I know, right to the game. But yeah, the shift moving to snap stuff into places is good.
Back
And
in my
there's a lot
day,
of
we
other
used
features.
Stardock fences and we liked it.
And color picker, there's a kind of global color picker on Power Tool as well, where you can just, I can't remember what the shortcut is, but you can basically color pick. I think it's Windows C or something. But anyway, yeah, you can color pick from any screen on this thing, and it gives you the hex and all the rest.
One thing, do a
fantastic.
video about 11, Windows 11, sometime soon.
Yeah, it's pretty good. There's one thing, another one. This is a bit of an out there one. I don't know if anyone's using Void Tools search everything. I've mentioned before, it dwarfs the Windows search features to the point that it's comical. Like there's no comparison. So their search tool indexes everything. It's instant. But what you can do is there's another tool which is like a registry change as well as a small app you can install, which replaces the native search in Windows with search everything. Now Windows native search is instant, and as opposed to the whole long filtered search, and supports all of your regular expressions, does all the other fancy stuff. It's like it's better in literally every single way. There's not a single feature of Windows search which is better than using Void Tools.
I bet it doesn't do upsells on you and try to get you to sign up for Office.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe it's missing that feature.
One more thing that I wanted to mention specifically for game development. In Terraria, we actually have a bunch of hotkeys for specific things that just for the sake of testing faster. We have hotkeys, for example, to change the resolution of the game to the minimum one, to the maximum one, to widescreen, to etc., etc. And we can see how everything looks UI-wise in a span of a second, just going through these hotkeys. That's something I don't see usually in game development, but you should totally add hotkeys specifically for features that you need in your game. We also have a hotkey to bring up dev commands list so that you can see every command, what it does, and how to use it in a neat menu just by pressing a hotkey.
Nice.
And another one too is if you're this works for Windows 10 and 11. If you're doing dev work and you're jumping between, in my case, you've got Photoshop open in one window, you've got Unity in another, you've got your code editor, you've got your reference web browser, you're trying to do stuff, and even with 2 to 3 monitors, you still might be running out of space. Especially because I like things full screened. Use the multiple desktops. It's control windows left and right. I actually have one which is all of the reference tools. So I press one button, which is one shortcut, control windows left, and it moves to browser and browser, and I've got two sets of research documents up. Then I press it again, and it switches over to my reference resources, which has Eagle and Obsidian. And I press it again, and it switches over to my code editor in full screen that I can work with. And I press it again, and then it switches to Unity in full screen across two windows with different tabs. So I can jump between full screen versions of each like state of development I'm in, rather than drag down, pull up, full screen, work on it, minimize. So have a look at the virtual desktop or the multiple desktop versions in Windows. I don't think enough people use them. It's really, really powerful.
I always forget them. I set them up, try them, and then like a week later, I've forgotten that it exists. I reboot and then I forget about them. I need to try.
I just keep adding more monitors.
Yeah,
sure, that's one solution. I guess.
I
tried that.
One over there.
I used to have 6. I used to have the whole 6 monitor setup thing, and I found that the problem I was having is I would look over and grab a window, drag it to the center, work on it, put it back, grab another window, and it's like, what am I even doing? This is stupid because it's so annoying looking up, right? So I realized virtual desktops was a much more sensible solution.
Arms, you put the monitors on arms so you can grab them and you can pull them close and move them
pull it over. You don't have to use the mouse.
And I'm not kidding. I actually have that here where I can actually pull the monitors close and push them away and all the rest.
That's why I just got this PC, and that's why I've got this monitor off to the side. When I want to play, I just swing it in front of the iMac. And there it is.
I'm down to one screen now. I forgot you got that new system, Andrew. How's that working out for you, by the way? Have you done much game development on it yet, or have you tried?
No game development, just gaming. And I was going to tell you, I've been playing some Age of Empires 4, but I'm not good. But
me either. We'll have to play.
Yeah. But that's it. I bought it for.
I might have to join you then.
I bought it for research purposes, because everybody keeps talking about all these games that I can't play, and Parallels doesn't work good enough, and so business expense, research purposes. Although I was saying it would be interesting if one day I did load up Unity and see, what does the project seem like if I dev on this for a little bit. I'd have to get a better monitor and some other stuff for that. But
and you'll be able to do some builds on it, Windows builds when you need.
Certainly some testing will come into play at some point. And there are certain assets like Bakery and stuff on the asset store that only work on Windows that everyone raves about that I would love to try out. So
also at some stage we're gonna have to do the software pass. I don't know about everybody else, but I've got like 15 bits of software that make it to every new computer that are better than all the default stuff, really cool features. And so I know what it's like. Whenever I tried to switch to Linux, I was like, I like the idea, but I don't know the good versions of all the tools, and it's exhausting. So if you're switching to effectively Windows for that case, then let us set you up with all the best versions.
Yeah.
It's Steam. It's the main one. And you're good.
I have Steam. That's all I got. Steam and Discord.
Yep. That's all you need for your gaming system. Yeah, that's cool. I'm excited to play some games. We'll have to jump in and do some Age and some other stuff, and just get a couple people in. Maybe we can fill up a full game. I've got like 3 other friends who are now playing. Oh, we just hit 200 likes. Maybe we'll get to 300 in the next 5 minutes. But yeah, I'd love to play, so we'll have to jump in and join. And the rest of you guys should get some too. And anybody that's watching, shoot me an email.
Yes, I'll forget. But if you're like about to play, send me an email, and I'll begrudgingly probably join you. But I haven't played since literally college, so you're gonna kick my ass.
No, it's fun. I've been playing with friends, just joining in like 2v2s and 2v2v2v2s and other things like that. Where you can just play like on a team with my friends who don't mind that we're gonna get stomped. Yeah, but if we can fill up a full like 8-player game, that'd be even better. Right, just do like a big giant game. Fun stuff. All right, well, was there anything else in this latest Unity version that everybody needs to know about before the end of the day? If not, I'm going to do a video about them this next week, just kind of give a quick overview of some of the stuff. And I know Andrew's got a stream coming up, but anybody got anything we missed that's really important?
I have more of a disclaimer about this version for Unity, because there's something that a lot of people will say, well, this version doesn't have a lot and it's not exciting and they're not doing anything with it. I've seen some comments like that, and I just want to point out, Unity specifically had a problem last year where they were adding so much and everything was in preview state that they got backlash for that. So this year is being spent entirely on stabilizing and getting to feature parity on a lot of their packages to what we had before. And I think this is not getting enough attention, that they're trying to make things not bad before they make things that are good again.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's entirely fair.
Yeah.
People want the best of both worlds. They want all the new stuff,
Yeah.
and they want it to work right away the first time.
And to be fair,
Right.
aside the documentation that Unreal doesn't have, they're actually getting that there. So
My only thing I've got is before we say goodbye on that is just because I'm always so self-aware that I don't really have much content to show off stuff that I'm doing. So I just thought for fun, here's the imager library I showed you last time, just to show some of the stuff I'm playing with. Some of it's going to make it into videos at some stage. I just thought this might be a good teaser as to the kinds of stuff I'm playing with at the moment for anybody curious.
Yeah, let's pop it up and give everybody a quick preview.
Because I've said many times that I basically work tends to keep me distracted, and I don't get to do the fun stuff, work on game mechanics and things. And so I finally had a week where I had a bit of free time, and so it was kind of fun getting to actually make some mechanics that are vaguely related to game development. So it's great being able to actually enjoy Unity as an engine again, and have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah, this was cool. I remember I went through and looked at this whole thing. You had lots of cool little experiments. How much time did you spend building these, by the way?
I started this, I think Tuesday morning, and I finished up probably earlier today. So I just spent a week kind of playing around with various ideas. I pulled up like Bioshock and other games on Let's Plays, and I just sort of said, "Ooh, I want that mechanic. I'll steal that, and I'll steal that." And I just started seeing how quickly I could get all the various mechanics from games I liked in.
This is very
now just
cool.
add multiplayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically done. Just could you put in some guns and make it multiplayer real quick, and then add a story?
Zombies. Need zombies.
Nice. So, Andrew, you're going to be going live later on tonight, right? Or
Tonight.
possibly talking about some new assets that are on sale and some deals.
Yeah, I'm gonna go live tonight. I'm trying to think if I should make a video on it or just go live. I'll probably just do live. Black Friday is coming up, and there's a lot of Infinity PBR stuff on sale, and I'm very excited about it. So I'm going to start talking about it tonight because I'm pretty sure there's previews happening tonight. So I'm going to be live doing my own stuff, but I will pop over to that. I think that's tonight at some point Pacific time when most people are asleep, except for Jason Story.
Maybe it's time
Yeah,
to
I'm
pick
gonna
up some
have
of
to
your
watch it.
packages and drop them in my project.
Black Friday is going to be the best time, in my opinion.
It always is. So I'm going to be watching too, just looking for deals and jumping there. And yeah, Anonymous mentioned the free tools too. There's some free tools available. I saw Code Monkey did a really good video on it, talking about the free tools and the other assets that were on sale. Definitely worth checking that out and just obviously grab the freaking tools. And I would check out Code Monkey's video too. I'll link that down below because that was a really good one I watched this morning.
That actually reminds me, like I normally don't have stuff to shill for, so this is one thing interesting. Just if anyone's interested, that link that Jason posted, which is all the various GIF stuff I did, somebody asked me specifically about the UI callouts. That sort of mouse over something, hold a button to fill up and then pick it up or something. I got enough questions about that I made a sample project that's just that portion, and it's up on my Ko-fi page. So if you look, if that last two images inside of that that imager library, if you're curious how that works, for anyone who's a supporter of any tier whatsoever, you can grab that project from the latest post on my Ko-fi page. So there you go.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Everybody should jump on that. Go donate some coffee and learn at the same time. So I was trying to find Code Monkey's post, but I'll drop that down below later. Anybody have any final words they wanted to share? Right, there was a quick I guess we had a chat from a member, so I want to say thanks for joining the membership, and that's awesome. Thanks for subscribing, everybody who has. And yeah, anything else, guys?
No, I'll be dropping some Game Jam stuff this week on the channel. That's about it.
Oh, sweet, with Vimlark.
No, this is I done a VR Game Jam recently, so I'll be dropping some stuff about how to build that and what was in it.
Oh, awesome. Everybody check that out down below too. That's David's channel's linked down below. And then I'll drop a link for Andrew's stream as soon as we get that in there. Be in the description as well. So thanks again, everybody, for coming out. Thanks for joining us. Please, again, hit the like, subscribe, go share the stream or whatever. And we'll see you all next week. Oh, don't forget to check out the courses and stuff down below too. I keep forgetting to mention those. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See ya.
But